Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Conservation Commission and Inland Wetlands Watercourse Agency regular meeting for Tuesday, December 16th, 2025 to order. We have one vacancy tonight, so, hello, Don. We'd like Sue to sit in for Joe for the first application, public hearing that we have tonight, and Allison for the second application tonight. All right. So that moves us on to the approval of minutes for November 18th. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to the additions? All right. Do we any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right. That's unanimous. All right. Moving on to item 4. All right. Do we have any applications for receipt and determination of significance? All right. So we're moving on to item 5. Tonight, public hearing on application CC number 25-29 of Michael Segan, applicant Thomas and Molly Rutledge, owner for a wetland permit to clear for a new driveway and associated grading and drainage in the upland review area to construct a single-family home at West Ledge Road, lot number 3, Assessor's Map A04, Block 203, Lot 003. This item was determined non-significant, and the public hearing was scheduled for today.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yes, in the interest of time, I'll just do a brief history of the application. So, again, it was a regulated activity application that was deemed non-significant at the November 18th meeting, but determined that a public hearing to be scheduled for the interest of the public so they could come and speak to it. That was for December 2nd, which was canceled due to weather. So we are having it tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Good evening. I'm Mike Segan with Richter and Segan. We are landscape architects and land planners on the project team. I'm getting feedback here. I don't know. Mike Segan, Richter and Segan, landscape architects and land planners on the project team. Our office is located close by here in Avon. With me is Bill Weckman from our office, working closely on the project and working the controls tonight. I'll be providing a quick overview of the site design, focusing on the activities in the upland review area, the regulated area. Then Tom Grimaldi, the civil engineer, will follow my presentation discussing erosion, sedimentation control, and drainage. And following Tom is Eric Davison, our wetland or wildlife biologist, wetland scientist, discussing his wetland report and his impact assessment. Eric will also come up in the middle of my presentation to discuss the actual wetland and description of the wetlands. I guess you didn't mention it, but this application is for really a permit for regulated activities in the upland review area. There is no direct wetland impacts, and it's primarily for a driveway construction accessing a single-family home. This is the location of the parcel. It's in the West Mountain section of both Simsbury and Canton. Here's the Simsbury portion of the parcel. It's on West Ledge Road. This is the loop on High Ridge. The tennis club is right up in the very north corner of the property, or off the north property line. It's a unique parcel in that it is on both sides of the town line. Again, here's the Canton-Simsbury town line that's shown in yellow here. The Simsbury portion, 70 acres on this side, obviously, and then the Canton portion on that side as well. Access to the parcel is only from West Ledge, which also is the only access to the Canton portion as well. Just from a high-level point of view, the site is all undeveloped forest land. Most of it is upland mixed forest, and there are some forested wetlands as well. Topography on the site ranges from fairly shallow to moderately sloping to extremely steeply sloping, and it's the steep slopes that have really driven how the development is located on this particular site. Next. This is the parcel here, the original parcel that's owned by the Rutledges. The original 168-acre parcel is really broken into two parcels, Parcel 1 and then Parcel 2. This application is strictly related to Parcel 1, which has all the proposed development on it. This is not part of this application. The Simsbury portion of the parcel is outlined in green here. Again, it's about 70 acres. The Canton portion is about 26 acres, and it's up in this portion. We've gotten approvals from the Canton Inland Wetland Agency, wetland permit from them last month. Tomorrow night, we're in front of the Canton Planning and Zoning Commission. They require a special permit for the earthwork and the amount of disturbance on the site. Next. This is the overall rendered concept plan for both the Simsbury portion outlined in the heavier outline and the Canton portion. It's for, again, a single family residence. It's in the middle of the Simsbury portion, just below the ridge line. And it includes two barns, a barn in Simsbury and also a barn in Canton. The drive comes off of West Ledge into the property, in through the Canton piece, and then up very steep hillside to the house lot, and then the barn is beyond that as well. It's interesting, the length of the driveway is oftentimes questioned, but there's about 120-foot vertical elevation from this point where you enter on West Ledge up to the house lot itself. So you can understand why the drive is so circuitous coming up the hillside. At points, it approaches the maximum allowed by code for a driveway. Next. This focuses in on the driveway entrance and really the focus of this application. The two wetland areas on the site, wetland area 1, wetland area 2, and the driveway coming into the site. Before I get into the actual activity within the upland review areas, I was going to have Eric come up and just speak on the wetlands themselves.
Can you hear me okay? Eric Davison, wildlife biologist, wetland scientist. Just to give you a brief overview of the wetland layout. So as Mike mentioned, there are two wetlands on the site. Wetland 1 is the primary wetland. That's this wetland here. It is a very large wetland that extends south into the parcel close to the driveway, but the bulk of the wetland is to the north, so it flows north. It fingers off to the northeast, but eventually it goes north-northwest and flows down and around the hillside into Cherry Brook ultimately. Most of the wetland on site is what we call a hillside groundwater slope forested wetland. So basically it's a glacial till hillside, and the wetland is formed by groundwater breakout coming out of the ground in seeps and springs and discharging and creating a wetland condition. That's particularly true for this upper reach of the wetland that's close to the proposed access drive. And as you drop down through the wetland, it flows into a series of leveled terraces where you get some seasonal flooding and some deeper ponding. And that's areas here and here. And then again, it picks up as it flows down the slope and it flows north. And then the offsite portion in Canton that we permitted in Canton is the same wetland essentially. So it's one very large interconnected headwater wetland that basically is, a very dendritic pattern that covers most of this hillside in this area here. Wetland 2 is this very small wetland here right by the road. This wetland is entirely anthropogenic, created historically, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Best I can tell, it was excavated as a water source, either for livestock or for a home. If you look at my report, photos 5 and 6, I show the hand-laid stone well that is at the very head of the wetland. So they basically dug it out, put this hand-made shallow well to capture the groundwater, and as the water came up, it flowed out of the well enough over time, over centuries, to create then a channel that carries the water down and then down the road, and then it flows across the street into a larger wetland system that's over here, which is actually part of the Hop Brook watershed. So that flows down in this direction. So it's a pretty interesting wetland. So it's a very steep hillside. The wetland wouldn't be there other than that historic excavation that captured that groundwater, gave it a place to come up to the ground, discharge, and basically create an eroded channel. So in the spring, water flows out of the well, discharges into this little channel water course down into the culvert and across the street. So I hand it back to Mike.
The driveway that comes in, which is within the upland review area of Wetland 1, is located roughly where the old logging road was in terms coming into the site, and actually follows it mostly up into the back part of the site and the upper areas of the site. There's, why is it here and why was the logging road located here? And you'll see, we'll look at some various options that we looked at moving farther away from this wetland, but we're into a very steep slope. This slope extends all the way down to the corner of the parcel where it really starts. And if you've driven up West Ledge and looked at this parcel, it just goes straight up all along here. This steep slope comes into this site as well. So the drive runs kind of at the base of that slope. We've moved it as far as we can to the south, to the point where we have a 16-foot cut into this slope. And I'll talk a little more in detail about that now, or shortly. I do want to get into detail of the activity in the upland review area, but I want to do that at the 20 scale drawings or enlargement drawings where you can see the grading and the restoration planting. Next, Bill. This just shows the, you can see them a lot. From this angle, I can't see them, but you can see all the steep topography that runs in through here a little more on this one. Next, Bill. We've done enlargement drawings for the entire site at 20 scale. There are 8 on the Simsbury portion. I'm only going to discuss the 3 that have the red dots here. Those are the 3 that have activities in the regulated area, and illustrate that. Next. Starting at the drive entrance, here's Wetland 1 that Eric just described. The drive comes in. The upland review limit of that is here. I'll trace that. It goes across here and around. The driveway's been pulled back some 45 feet from the south tip of the wetlands. Activity here is this portion of the drive obviously is the main activity in this portion, relates to the drive construction, the clearing for the drive, the grading, drainage, and then the revegetation, pretty extensive replanting along the cleared edge of the existing forest, with native trees and shrubs to build that edge back up, and then across the drive too on this hillside, replanting the native forest species. Next, Mo. Actually, go back. Just one comment. This is, well, here's the upland review area. This is well outside the upland review area, but the clearing that was done for Basin 1, the drive entrance, our approach to revegetating that is to really reforest that edge, with all native species, many of which are out there, mostly which are out there on the site now in this general area, at a very dense planting spacing, which typifies what the density is in the existing forest. So it's that the intent, again, is the entire property line is very heavily forested, and we want to, both from an environmental point of view, but also from being a good neighbor, to reforest that edge as well. Next. Extending up the driveway, this is the very tip of Wetland 1. The drive little piece here is still within the upland review area, so it's the same drive construction. And then again, kind of a heavy planting of native plants. There's also the very, in the upland review area, the very, I guess, eastern portion of Basin number 2, which is in that upland review area, and then that's stabilized and replanted. Most of the storm basin areas, actually all of them, and the clearings that have been done for the temporary basins are being revegetated in meadow, mostly native, actually all native meadow in through here. The type of meadow, and I'll discuss that shortly, depends on the condition and where it's located on the site. But heavy emphasis on creating habitat diversity with the meadow. The site is 100% forested now. It'll provide that diversity. We're also real proponents of pollinator meadows and pollinator attracting plant material. And so the meadows that we're using have a number of native pollinator plants in them. Next. Wetland number 2, the small seepage wetland, actually I think historically was a well from an old settlement way back. There is no activity within 100 feet of this wetland, but because of the steep slope above it, your regulations require that we extend the upland review area up 200 feet. So that extends up to here. The clearing limits for the meadow below the house for the septic and the storm drainage system are well outside of that upland review area, but we do earmark an area here where there might be some selective clearing depending on what may be necessary to open up the view shed out. This area, which regulated area, upland review area, if there's any clearing here, it would only be done, there would be no ground disturbance, I should say. It'll just be, stumps will be left in the ground, no grading. The ground vegetation will be left in this area, and it'll be overseeded with a native shrub and meadow mix. By the way, the steep slopes really end about here, so they start to flatten out here. So there's no clearing above this wetland area and anywhere along these very steep slopes that are above the road. Next. This is the plant schedule showing the all native plant list here, trees and shrubs. A vast majority of these are found on the site. We're adding a few that we haven't seen on the site that probably, if we looked hard enough, we'd probably find them out on the site somewhere. So that's the plant list here. And that extends over all the area that I showed you, the entire length of the lower driveway and in the meadow areas as well. So all native in the areas, the upland review areas, and the entire drive length all the way up from the entrance all the way up the site. There's meadow mixes for various conditions. The first two here are basin side slopes and all the other cleared areas in the large meadow area below the house. And both of these mixes contain a number of native pollinator plants. The mix here is for the basin bottoms. This logging mix we find is very effective for the shade side of cleared areas where you're into shadow, the north side, I should say. And the fescue mix that will be used along the shoulders of the road and probably mowed maybe once a month kind of thing, just to keep the woods and meadows back from the driveway edge. The lawn mix here doesn't show really a traditional lawn anywhere in what I showed you in the lower drive. There'll probably be lawn up around the house itself. This is a summary of the regulated activities, and it's shown in blue here. And I did forget to mention, there is a little bit in the upland review area here of the outlet for basin number 1. But other than that, most of it relates to the driveway in terms of the ground disturbance, and there's no ground disturbance in that area. Selective clearing that potentially would be have some clearing in it. I don't know if you can zero in, Bill, on that chart. The main point here is there are 0 activities in the wetland itself. There's no direct impacts. The total impact on the site, and it's hard for me to read, is 0.81 acres. 0.52 is related to the driveway and the drainage, and with direct ground activity, and 0.29 is that selective clearing where there would be no ground disturbance above wetland number 2. The activities in the wetlands are the sedimentation, erosion control, site prep, the clearing, of course, and some potentially selective clearing above wetland 2, the earthwork, the driveway construction, drainage and electrical buried utility line that would run along the driveway, stormwater management, basins and infiltration basins, and then, of course, the reforesting and revegetation of the disturbed areas. We have no direct wetlands impact, and this commission at the last meeting deemed this a non-significant activity in the upland review areas. But we still looked at some alternatives and just wanted to take the commission through that. This is the general location of the old logging road. You know, why didn't we maybe move the drive down this way, get away from, well, this is where those very steep slopes come into the site, and it just is not even. If you've been out there, you'll understand they're so steep you couldn't even move up and down to get up these slopes, and the amount of disturbance to the forested hillside would be quite extensive. And then, of course, moving to the north is wetland 1, so you'd have a direct crossing of wetland 1. So it made the most sense to follow the old logging road in, which is at the base of this very steep slope. The first option we looked at was the actual logging road location itself, which is shown in the red here. I believe that's about 15 feet from the tip of the wetlands here. We then looked at moving the road down a little bit to the south and coming in and moving it farther away from the wetland itself to the base of the slope. And it's about 21 feet from the slope. I'm sorry, from the wetland tip here on the south. And then we had a number of meetings with staff, and they asked when we reviewed this location, have we moved this as far away as possible? So we went back to the office, we looked at things and moved this location back. It's now some 45, 46 feet away from the tip of the wetlands, well into this slope. There's actually a 16-foot cut here. Moving any further away, and you literally are chasing grade and would have major disturbance to the mature forest on that slope. So we feel it's a fair solution where we ended up. Next. So that is a quick review of the activities within the upland review areas and our approach to basically an all-native revegetation of the disturbed areas on the site and reforesting in certain areas. There's one other comment we wanted to make from a more conservation point of view. If you go to the next one. Looking at the entire site, we looked at the total disturbance on the full 70-acre site. Bill, if you want to go into the chart. The total project area being 70 acres, the total area of disturbance is 17.8 acres. Of that, 2.89 will remain or will be impervious surface. And it's primarily the driveway is the biggest, the length of the driveway, the structures, the two barns in the house, parking and walks, etc. But I think what's encouraging here is that the revegetation area and restoration plantings, most of this is the native meadow, totals almost 15 acres of the 18 acres that are disturbed. So most of it's being put back into, I think, native plantings and pervious surface. With that kind of overview, that concludes my part of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Tom. One comment I'm going to make, he's going to talk about the basins and the grading of that. He has updated his grading of the basins based on engineering comments. Our drawings don't reflect those, I would say, tweaks of the grading. None of that work is in the upland review area, so it doesn't affect the activity in the upland review area. I'd be happy to answer any questions here now, or
I did have a couple of questions. The 16-foot cut I think it's to the west of the driveway. The 16-foot cut that's to the west of the driveway near the entrance to West Ledge. That is going to be cleared, correct, of trees and replanted? That's near wetland 1, is it 1 or 2? 1. Yeah, that one. You said that there was a 16-foot cut.
yeah, that
On that steep slope.
is right in through here.
So that cut will be of the existing vegetation then replanted?
Pardon me.
That would be the 16-foot cut. That's the cutting of the trees in that section. Will there be grading on that as well? And
That's
yeah.
grading into the hillside. And
Okay.
then revegetating.
And that's glacial till on top of the rocks? Yeah, okay. And what size trees are you looking to plant?
The trees that are in the proposed, because there's so many of them,
Yeah.
conservation.
Okay, so
They're small.
Small, yeah. And so, will there be need for, to protect them from deer browse
We'll have the guards.
collars? Okay. Okay. And then the meadow near the house on the steep slope, is that, it looks very steep. Is it mowable, easily mowed?
Yeah, our intent is to mow the meadows and Eric will
Speak to that,
as well
okay.
relative to wildlife.
Okay.
Is in November, after the Hike the Nation movement, and we'll talk to that. And I prefer to do it in late winter, like in March.
March, yeah.
We have
The seed heads and, yeah,
set of these, obviously for wildlife as well.
yeah,
So that's the intent, just to mow once.
once a year. Or maybe once every other year? Or portions, I know sometimes with meadows you can mow, one portion one year, another portion another year. That way you keep the insect life and the, that's, because I don't think, the only reason is to keep down the woodies. Yeah, yeah, okay. And will there be curbs on the driveway or no? Curbs, or will it be flat to the edge? Okay.
Hi, my name's Tom Grimaldi. I'm the principal engineer from Hillbrand Engineers out of Granby, Connecticut. To answer your question, there is one steep section
Okay.
of 12% grade that's on the Canton side
Yeah.
that has curb on one side.
All right.
The entire driveway, the rest of the entire driveway is uncurbed,
Good, good.
vegetated waterways
Yeah. Yeah.
treatment.
Good, good. All right. I know there are a lot of salamanders and things up in that area.
Mike, can I? So I'll jump right into it if we can go to the clearing plan. So this is the clearing plan. This shows the 17.8 acres that Mike was talking about. You'll notice in various areas, you'll see brown lines here. It's kind of hard to see at this scale. So what we're doing with this is we're requiring the land clearers to install some of the initial erosion and sedimentation control measures. Because it's a fairly large area that's going to be cleared, and we want these perimeter erosion control measures to be installed. These are going to consist of sediment logs that'll be put in place first, and then a wood chip stump grinding berms that'll be 6 foot wide and 3 foot high. That's what these dark lines represent, these brown ones all the way through. And then you'll see various green lines through the site. That's other standalone sediment logs and straw wattles, just to kind of break up runoff as the land clearers move through the site, as they work their way out. With stumping and grubbing, they'll install the next set of erosion and control measures. And we are going to use initially the existing logging road. There's a construction entrance zone there. And once they get into the site, then I'll explain it in my next slide. It'll be a little bit easier to understand. So this is the storm drainage and erosion and sedimentation control plans. So at this point, the access for clearing is no longer going to be used. They're going to move over to the actual site of the proposed driveway. You'll notice there's vegetated swales here and in this pink line. You'll see the pink. The pink, these are temporary sediment traps, and we're doing along where the vegetated waterways are going to be used. We're going to be utilizing these as temporary sediment trenches to try to trap some of the water with straw wattle check dams in them. And on the low side of the driveway, you'll see another pink line. This is trenching as well. So we have to put underground utilities in up to the site. So we decided that we put these trenches in, use them as temporary sediment trenches to grab any of the water as it's graded from the right-hand side where it's crowned, that's heading towards the north. And once the project is completed and these areas are stabilized, then these trenches will be cleaned out and they could be extended as required and utilized, repurposed for bringing in underground utilities, which in this site is just going to be underground electric telephone cable. And you'll continue to see these heavy berms backed up with straw wattles, sediment logs in these areas. The erosion and sedimentation control measures are going to be done in 3 phases. First phase is going to be the perimeter controls, as explained previously, that the land clears were installed. The second is really the heart of it, phase 2. There's 11 sub-phases. I have a detailed phasing and construction sequencing as part of the plan set. And what that does is we tried to work with the land. There's a high point proposed here. So if you look at the construction sequencing in phase 2, you'll notice that we go from the high point to the entrance, and that will require this area to get completed and stabilized, including roughing out of the detention basin and extending the pipe. The effort here is to really get the contractor to phase this as much as possible because it's a lot to open up all at once. This particular site, what the plan would be to, as they box out the driveway, take all the forest litter and topsoil and use that for embankment on the low side and start to get that stabilized and shaped up, which could then convey the water towards these sediment trenches. And this will continue throughout the entire site, all the way to the end of the driveway. This area here, you'll see sediment traps here. There's temporary sediment trap, temporary sediment trap. This was the catalyst for this additional clearing. So in an effort to protect the wetlands, we have sediment traps in various locations throughout the site. These sediment traps, again, from a high point to a low point, you'll see a culvert here. These are temporary culverts. These culverts are here only to convey dirty water into the temporary sediment traps. What we tried to do was utilize these low points. So when this culvert comes out, when the area gets stabilized, the new culvert will be installed to the basin number 2. And same thing here. There's a pipe here that comes to this sediment trap. This will be extended out into here. So we're trying to keep everything as tight to the road as possible, use temporary culverts as required, remove those. Those culverts will be backfilled in crushed stone so they can be easily removed. And that will help to cut off some of the water that's running directly down the road. It could get into the stone here, and that stone will be chased out into the temporary sediment traps. This is basin number 2. We tried to encapsulate and enclose all our disturbed areas. The entire first 2,000 feet of this driveway, because we are going to be into compact glacial till, there is groundwater. There will be a groundwater intercepting drain, otherwise known as an underdrain, on the high side of the driveway. The nice thing about that is, if you could just go back one, Bill. What we can do is, with the underdrain on the high side, we can then poke small pipes under the driveway and use that to recharge the wetlands as well with clean groundwater. And that will bring me to the drainage. We could start right here. This is basin number 1. All our basins are infiltration basins. The stormwater management basins are all infiltration basins. And the way we set these basins up, the infiltration will take place in the bottom of the basin. There are sediment forebays in each one. So the sediment forebay helps to do the initial cleaning of the water, remove the 80% of the total suspended solids and a portion of our water quality volume. And then the rest of the basin will treat the rest of the water quality volume and promote infiltration and groundwater recharge, which will then go out to the basins. The only water that's actually going to go out the pipe is going to be on the large storm events, like the 50 and 100-year storm events. The goal of these is to get the water out of the bottom and back in toward the wetlands. We could probably go to this. So this is at the top of the hill, and this is the town line right here. The driveway has just come up that steep section, which is curbed, and then it's coming over towards the house to show the drainage and how that's going to get from the roadway to the next set of basins. So this is basin number 5. There's a total of 6 basins on the site. The biggest thing that we tried to do with the basins was to maintain all our current pre-developed watersheds. That is really, really important. That was a big thing for us. We were able to do that. That's why there's detention basins all over this site and very little conventional drainage. The only area that has conventional drainage is in the Canton side on that steep slope. The rest of this site is vegetated swales that will treat the runoff into these infiltration basins, and all these basins have sediment forebays in them. This here is below the house. The house is up in here. And in the pink, you'll see there's more sediment traps. The sediment forebay will be used as a temporary sediment trap. One of the main goals was not to use the basins themselves for sediment basins or sediment traps, because it's difficult. Once these are utilized, it's difficult to get the silt out and to get them clean to make sure that they can still function as an infiltration basin. So the goal was to create temporary sediment traps and not separate and not utilize these basins. All of our treatment meets the current 2024 Stormwater Quality Manual, especially for water quality volume treatment. And between the sediment forebays and the actual basins themselves, that'll finish polishing up and cleaning up the water before it infiltrates into the groundwater table. All roof water on the site is going into underground infiltration systems, and every roof is piped underground. And all of our basins are sized to attenuate every storm from the 1-year storm to the 100-year storm, including our underground infiltration systems for the dwellings. Adam Kessler had asked us to go, he said you could do the 25-year storm, but he wanted to see how the 50 and 100-year storm reacted. And we were concerned that it might let a little bit too much water out, so it didn't take much to upsize the infiltration basins, which we did, so we can actually retain the 100-year storm event in our underground systems, and eventually they'll high-level overflow out if there's back-to-back storms. All our basins drain within 48 hours, so that's great. So if we have back-to-back storms, we can also deal with that. And I think that's pretty much it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
This is a long driveway, so can you talk about snow removal, where snow will, is there a management plan for snow removal?
Yeah, so we'll have to go back, Bill. Yeah, so snow, what they're planning on doing, because the road is crowned, there's going to be 2 passes, and the goal is going to be to get the snow all along the edges. We're trying to keep it out of the actual drainage swales. In areas where there's high points, they could certainly do that. And then once the basins are completed and these sediment traps are gone, There's areas around each basin to actually store material. Go to the next one, Bill. And the same thing here. There's large meadow areas in here and large meadow areas in here that will be maintained. And this kind of follows this pattern throughout the site.
Good. Thank you. All right, thank you. Do the commissioners have any other questions at this point? All right.
Okay.
Oh, we have,
pass it
yes,
on to
okay.
Eric
Yeah,
Davis.
thank you.
Okay, so again, Eric Davison, I'm a wildlife biologist and wetland scientist. Just thank you, Tom. Briefly go through the impact assessment and talk about some of the biological evaluations we did. I think Mike and Tom hit the high points here with respect to how you evaluate this application for its potential for significant or adverse impact. It's a very small amount of activity on a very large site. There are no direct wetland impacts, which is obviously the most critical component in avoiding adverse impact to wetlands. We've got about 35,000 square feet of upland review area activity, so 0.8 acres on a very large site. The activities in that upland review area is simply the construction of the driveway and construction of some of the stormwater basins. Most of these areas are going to be revegetated, and as Mike pointed out, there's a robust planting plan on this site. There is very little conventional lawn being planted and no conventional lawn proposed within the upland review areas. So all of these areas will ultimately be either shrub, tree, or seasonally mowed meadow. So good habitat, good cover, good erosion control, good habitat value. As we were doing the impact analysis, there was several issues that related to amphibians and reptiles that we flushed out. So I want to go through those. By way of background, I've been working as a wildlife biologist in Connecticut since 1999. I'm the co-author of Conservation of Amphibians and Reptiles in Connecticut, which was a book published by the Connecticut DEP in 2021. And in terms of the vernal pool analysis, we used the Best Development Practices Manual, which was developed by the Metropolitan Conservation Alliance, which was an outfit that I worked for several years in the mid-2000s, taking that BMP manual and applying it on town-wide vernal pool surveys throughout New York and Connecticut. So I'm very familiar with that, this particular type of analysis, and this type of vernal pool analysis was adopted by the regulatory agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers. It's used by the Siting Council, so it's widely used and accepted. So let me start there with the vernal pool impact analysis. We did not survey for vernal pools on the property. So because we didn't have that direct vernal pool survey data, we took a very conservative approach here and basically went into vernal pool 1 because vernal pool 2 has no, wetland 1. Wetland 2 has no vernal pool habitat because it is simply a saturated wetland that discharges flow very briefly, doesn't hold water for long periods of time. We identified 2 potential vernal pools in wetland 1, and that's, let me just point that out on this very busy map here, which I'll explain, but those are basically here and here. And you can see in total, these areas that are hatched in blue, these potential vernal pools, are very large in size. So what we did was we took any area that had any small potential of holding water long enough to support vernal pools. In reality, if we went out and did a survey of where the egg masses lie and where the actual breeding pools are, the vernal pool basins, they would certainly be much smaller than this. But again, since we didn't have that data, we took a conservative approach. We applied the Best Development Practices Manual methodology and essentially made sure that the development complied with those pre and post development calculation recommendations based on these very large potential breeding areas. And that's what's shown on this map. I won't go through every number, but let me give you the highlights. But basically what the analysis is you take the vernal pool basin, again, shown in blue, and then you apply 2 habitat zones, a 100-foot zone and a 750-foot zone, which is this outer green ring. And the post-development goal in those two zones are for the 0 to 100 foot zone, no development. And for the 100 to 750 foot zone, that you don't exceed 25% development in that zone, with a few other caveats. So that's what this map shows, and this is in my report, of course, and you can dig into the numbers, but let me just give you the highlights of what the outcome of the analysis was. Basically, post-development, both pools lie at about 5% developed, and that basically is just the access drive. That's the only development that's being proposed in the road, or in the vernal pool habitat zone. Nothing in the 100-foot, 5% in the 100 to 750 foot. So we comply with both of those zones. And in terms of post-development forest cover, PVP1 is going to be 82% forested, and PVP2 is 76% forested. The remaining land use category that we mapped and is included in these calculation tables is what we're calling developed clearing. And basically these are the meadows that are mostly the stormwater basin. So these, again, are not lawn, they're not impervious surface. From the manual criteria, these areas are considered habitat because they're meadows and not lawn and not pavement. And those are 8 and 13% respectively. So we meet the forest cover criteria, we meet the development criteria, and then we have that category of meadow that is mostly stormwater management basins. And as Mike mentioned, one of the maintenance practices we're going to implement to prevent impacts to amphibians that might be using these meadow areas is we recommended no mowing until November 1. So basically you want to mow once the amphibians are dormant. So the best development practices manual also has a few other secondary impact recommendations. And I just wanted to go through those quickly to show you that we meet those. They recommend only low traffic roadways within that 750-foot zone, which they consider any road that's 5 to 10 cars per hour. Certainly the driveway is going to be far less than that traffic volume. So we meet that criteria. The second is not including directional lighting into the vernal pool. We have no lighting proposed at that segment of road that's going to face the vernal pool. And then the last sort of big critical one is if you design stormwater basins within that 750-foot zone, that you don't create what we call a decoy breeding pool. In other words, you don't create a ponded stormwater basin that as amphibians are migrating to their natural pool, they encounter this stormwater basin, find it suitable, lay their eggs, and it ultimately is not a productive habitat. So we call that a decoy vernal pool. Again, as Tom mentioned, all of these basins are designed as infiltration basins. I think the longest hold time is like 48 hours. So they're not going to hold water. They're not going to attract unwanted amphibian breeding. Then the last item was we did an NDDB review, which I'm sure you're familiar with what that is. The Natural Diversity Database Review. And that came back with eastern box turtle, which I'm sure you've run into Simsbury quite a bit. And so in anticipation of us needing a stormwater general permit from the DEP, we developed a box turtle protection plan. And this is sort of a standard plan that I develop many times throughout the year for various clients that have to get stormwater management plan, stormwater general permits, and they have box turtles and have to have NDDB compliance. So we developed that plan. That plan is included in my report. But essentially the highlights of that are we're going to start work in the spring when the turtles have emerged and are active. We're going to do sweeps of the construction zone, search for turtles before, during, and after initial clearing and grading starts. And then we educate the contractors on what to look out for each morning as they start work, checking around equipment, checking the access roads. But those are sort of the highlights of that. If you have any questions, I can elaborate.
Just a quick question. Because this is all staged, the construction of all this is staged, you'll be checking for the turtles, et cetera, during this. Do you have like a formal procedure for how you'll be evaluating at each stage before you go to the next stage? Like if there's any changes you need?
Yeah, the critical time is when you're establishing erosion control barriers and you're doing that initial clearing. So we like to do a pre-sweep of any air, like if they say we're coming in to clear, grub, and grade this particular area tomorrow, we would go in the day before, we do a pre-construction sweep in that vegetated area. And we try to go back out first thing in the morning, meet with the contractors, do a last sweep as they're clearing. Once the erosion control measures are up and installed and the area is devoid of vegetation, there's an avoidance measure there that the turtles generally want to avoid. That it's noisy, it doesn't have cover, so they generally avoid those areas. But during that construction period, the contractors are then doing regular sweeps of the erosion control barriers, walking the barriers just to make sure that there's no turtles trapped inside. And then we sort of downshift to, periodic sweeps over like every 1 or 2 weeks once the clearing is done. So it's really that critical initial stage when the clearing happens.
Other questions? All right. If there aren't any other questions and that concludes the presentation? All right. Right, yes.
Did anything substantially change from your presentation in November?
No, it shouldn't have.
Okay, thanks.
All right. All right, thank you. Now, this is a public hearing. Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this project? Yes, yeah? Oh, all right. And do the commissioners have any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, we could entertain a motion for the... Oh, thank you. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. Hearing is closed. Any further discussion on the application from the commissioners? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agencies approves application CC 25-29 of Michael Kagan, applicant, for Thomas and Molly Rutledge, owners, for a wetland permit to clear a new driveway and associated grading and drainage in the upland review area to construct a single-family home at West Ledge Road, Lot 3. Based upon the following findings, that there are expected to be no direct wetland soils impacts as a result of the project. Short-term impacts from the proposed development will be controlled by installation and maintenance of the erosion sediment controls and construction runoff controls. And the best practices for minimal impact to potential vernal pools and the property will be followed and subject to the conditions listed by the staff.
I'd also like to add one thing, that if the applicant would consider mowing portions of the property every other year to alternate so that not the whole property is mowed at once, all the meadows. It would be beneficial to the wildlife.
To add to the following conditions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much for a well thought out project.
I would get a motion to recess until 7. Motion, we recess until 7.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right. Everyone, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We now have a public hearing for application CC number 25-25 of McLean Affiliates, Inc., an applicant and owner for a wetlands permit to construct 40 new residential units at the existing McLean retirement community with associated improvements that includes wetland crossings and disturbances in the upland review area at 75 Great Pond Road, Assessor's Map E08, Block 147, Lot 001. This application was determined to be significant, and the public hearing scheduled for today.
Thank you, Chairwoman. We have a applicant here ready to make a presentation. I just wanted to go through a few logistical items. So the application, 75 Great Pond Road, CC number 25-25. Application receipt was on October 21st, 2025. It was determined to be significant, and a public hearing was scheduled for tonight, December 16th. At that October 21st meeting, there was also a vote to retain a third-party reviewer. Once a public hearing is open, it must be closed within 35 days, so that brings us to January 21st. The applicant can grant extensions up to 65 days. We received 61 public comments, which have been uploaded to the Town of Simsbury website, as well as provided to you, the commissioners. Thank you.
So is the applicant ready to make their presentation?
Yes. Well, can you go to our thing, please? Good evening, Madam Chair and Commission members. Just warn everybody coming up here, don't trip all over the stuff in front of the podium here. Yeah.
I'm sorry, before we start with the presentations, Madam Chair, if we could accept the intervener petition. Yep.
Yes, we do have an intervener for this evening, so we have a motion to accept the intervener petition. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll motion we accept the intervener.
All right, second, any further discussion? All right, fine. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. So just a little bit of the schedule for tonight. We will have the applicant make the presentation. We will have our third-party reviewer make their presentation. We will then hear from the intervener. And after that, we might take a short break, depending on the time, and then we will have public audience comments. All right, good evening.
Okay, good evening. My name is Joe Williams. I am a land use attorney and partner in the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin. Our office is at 1 Constitution Plaza in Hartford, and I am pleased to be back before you again with a new proposal for McLean to build 40 new duplex-style homes on its campus at 75 Great Pond Road in Simsbury. Our team with me here this evening includes Lisa Clark, the CEO of McLean, Tom Daly, Mike Doherty, and Matt Sanford with SLR, and Dennis Quinn, our herpetologist. You will hear after me from the SLR team, and the other folks are available for questions as needed. Now, this is a new application. It stands on its own merits, and it provides all the technical information necessary to demonstrate to you that it satisfies your regulatory requirements, avoids an adverse impact on wetlands or watercourses, and should be approved. But the context and the recent history leading up to this proposal is relevant and important as well. So that background is as follows. As we said at your October meeting this year, we appreciate your diligence through a long and tiring process on our previous application for 52 units. And while we were disappointed that you were not comfortable approving that application, in your May decision, you gave us specific recommendations. We found them very helpful, we appreciated it, and we took them to heart. Drawing upon its strong commitment to conservation and to expanding housing options for seniors in Simsbury, McLean decided to revise its proposal to satisfy your concerns while still maintaining a viable project. McLean also asked Dennis Quinn to continue his radio telemetry study tracking eastern box turtles in the southern part of the McLean campus. Dennis found that the turtles were hibernating and nesting in the area between the finger wetlands. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Yeah, in that area where the walking path is between the two finger wetlands. So because of finding that the turtles were nesting and hibernating in that area, Dennis recommended that all development be moved out of that area, and McLean agreed. Dennis's recommendations, along with McLean's desire to address your concerns with the prior plan, led us to make a major change to the layout and shift the homes to either side of the wetlands, sort of to the left and the right on the plan that you see, thereby maintaining a large undisturbed area between the wetlands. To accommodate this change, McLean has reduced the number of units by 12 from 52 to 40 proposed units. As we discussed in the last hearing, and Dennis confirms, as I know you're aware, eastern box turtles are a terrestrial species. They do not depend on wetlands, and their upland habitat is not within the jurisdiction of an inland wetlands agency, but they are a conservation concern, and McLean is taking care to appropriately protect them. Now, to our application. The application that you have before you has been carefully redesigned and studied to propose no direct or indirect adverse impacts to wetlands or watercourses. I hope you've been able to review the booklet that we provided you all. Looks like this. That contains the core information that we thought you would find useful to have on hand. The narrative at tab 1 of the booklet summarizes our new proposal, and in particular, the work that we have done and the additional information we have provided to address the recommendations in your May resolution. And the full SLR reports, although they're in executive summaries in the booklet, the full reports were submitted separately from the booklet, and you have those in electronic and separate paper versions. You can see that we have not only reduced the number of units by nearly a quarter, but also reduced the wetlands crossings to only 1 crossing now, where it was 2 in the prior application. And that crossing is designed as a bridge to avoid any direct impact on wetland 8, which Tom Daly, our professional engineer with SLR and the lead project engineer, will explain to you. We also focused on avoiding any indirect impacts to the wetlands or to Hop Brook by ensuring that the same amount of stormwater continues to reach wetland 8. Remember, we talked about that last time. And by avoiding impacts to groundwater flow, by mitigating soil compaction, breaking up the site work into additional phases, running all new calculations to confirm that the stormwater system complies with the new state standards, controlling fertilizers with a new integrated pest management plan, and providing additional LID, low impact design methods to ensure that rainwater will continue to infiltrate and recharge the groundwater and wetlands. These are all things that you asked us to do in your May decision, and Tom will tell you more about those as well. Next, McLean's design team has proposed a comprehensive landscape strategy designed to beautify the development, integrate the landscaping with the environmental performance of the site, support our pollinators, and respect the privacy of our residents and our neighbors. Mike Doherty, a landscape architect with SLR, will describe the landscape goals and strategy, as well as the lighting that we will use. Our team has also provided you a detailed wetlands impact assessment report and a comprehensive biological assessment report for the entire McLean property. Matt Sanford of SLR, senior professional wetland scientist and registered soil scientist, will walk you through those reports, the proposed regulated activities, and his conclusions. We've also given you a detailed description of several alternative designs to show you why the current plan is the most feasible and prudent alternative with the least environmental impact to wetlands and watercourses. And of course, now among the alternatives that we considered is the 52-unit plan that was the subject of our prior application, and that's in the booklet as well. When you review our complete written submission and hear from our team, I believe you will find that we have provided you a substantial body of work that responds to your recommendations on our prior application. We trust you will further find that our application satisfies the standards of your regulations and demonstrates that the proposed regulated activities are not likely to have a substantial adverse impact on wetlands or watercourses, and that there are no alternatives to them that are feasible and prudent and will have less environmental impact on wetlands. That's my opening summary. Happy to answer any questions for now. Otherwise, we'll turn it to Tom Daly, then Mike Doherty, and Matt Sanford from SLR to summarize their work and why it shows that there will be no significant impact to wetlands. After those gentlemen speak, I'll come back for a couple administrative matters. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Joe. For the record, Tom Daly with SLR Consulting. I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut. Before we get into the main part of the application, I do have to, there is 2 smaller components of the application we'll go through. So Brittany, next slide. So there's 2 other components of the application that are part of your package. First of all is the realignment of Sarah Lane. If you go out to McLean, there is a roadway system that works around the campus. When the Goodrich building was built, a lot of realignment of that road and bringing in green space. There's a portion of the internal access road that is really a remnant of old development. It essentially has a kind of a weird switchback into it. So what McLean is looking to do as part of this application is essentially realign that section. So off to the on this plan, you can see the health center, which is off to the right. So if you ever come into McLean, you essentially drive into the drive, you turn right, and you would head off to the Goodrich building is over here. You have the health center. You can see faintly here, this is the main drop off to the health center. Today, it's a little convoluted. You have to come in here, you have to turn here, come here, and then back up through here. So our proposal is to realign the driveway. This area will be going through an area that is already occupied by cottages and pavement area, which will be removed. So ultimately, it's a no net increase in impervious surfaces. But we do have so there is a wetland corridor, a wetland here that heads towards Great Pond Road. We have approximately about 25 feet of sidewalk, which falls in your upland review area. All the realignment of the road is not within your upland review. We just have a little sidewalk. So when they built the villas many years ago, there is a sidewalk system there, and we're just linking that too. If you go through McLean, pedestrian connectivity is very important. So now these residents that live in these villas here will be able to get on a sidewalk and head over to the Goodrich. And if you remember part of those applications, the Goodrich building includes many amenity spaces that were designed for the whole community. So that's one regulated activity that is a very small one, but it is part of your application. Next slide. And the other area is, so once again, we have the health center here that's located. There is a proposal for a new parking lot. We built this parking lot as part of the Goodrich. Because the Goodrich and this central core has become so integral to the campus in terms of especially using all the amenity space. McLean has community events, and there was a need for some additional overflow parking lot here. This is the upland review area here, so the new parking lot is not located in your upland review area. It's essentially just an extension of the existing parking lot that wraps around. The only activity that's really would show up on this plan, there's currently a garage out here, which we are going to remove the garage and restore and revegetate the area. That garage is being removed because this is essentially going to be the new connection into the Meadow homes. So once again, no regulated activities here except for the removal of the garage here, but it is part of the application. Next slide. So the proposal before you this evening is for 40 units. As the commission may remember, each building is a duplex. So you'll see 20 buildings, each one containing 2 units. The proposal before you this evening is, I'll walk you. So this is, north is pointing to the left. We have the golf course located here, and Hop Brook is down in the corner. We have the Burkholder building and the health center to orientate you. I'll walk you around the site in a clockwise fashion. So this was the parking lot I just presented to you. The goal, this driveway exists, but we will be removing some garages and repaving that. Ultimately, at this point, you'll come in and you'll have the entrance drive into the Meadow homes. This is essentially in the same location it was before, and it's really picked in that location because it's at the apex of the curve, provides good sight lines in both directions. As you come into the property, you can see this green area here. Currently located here is the existing stormwater basin that was constructed for the Burkholder building. Back when stormwater was done in those times, frankly, water quality was not really part of the conversation. It was simply, what are the peak flow rates and are you mitigating those to pre-existing conditions? Since then, we've learned a lot about water quality, and water quality is kind of almost, so now we're designing these stormwater systems to look at water quality and quantity, just not quantity. So we took a look at this basin and we saw an opportunity to bring this basin up to 2025 standards. In 2024, the DEP issued a new stormwater manual. They gave us a lot of guidelines and requirements. So we will be expanding and reconstructing that basin to provide today's current stormwater standards. And that basin will be designed as a bioretention basin. And that's also important too, because that ultimately, that basin feeds into the wetland corridor, as you recall, wetland 8. And to orientate you to, we have 2 wetland corridors as part of this plan. We have this, and Matt will get much more detailed. But on this plan, that was the wetland corridor that the commission spent a lot of time talking about. We have an additional wetland system here. But as you come in, so we're pretty excited about the opportunity to really take something that's outdated and turn it into something modern. Ultimately, this basin still is taking the water from Burkholder. Our stormwater is coming down into the basins that we're constructing. So really, this is a retrofit more than anything. As you come into the property, we have a 24-foot paved road, and we have sidewalk on one side. We have a cluster of 4 buildings here, and that's 8 units. And then as Joe indicated, previously we had a wetland crossing here and here. We had 2 wetland crossings that were farther down into the wetland corridor. We have worked with the wetland scientists, and we've picked this location to cross the wetland. And I'll show you a little bit farther about how we're crossing that detail. But one thing I would notice is now instead of 2 crossings, we have 1, and we're crossing at the very high end of the wetland corridor. As you cross the wetlands, we'll come into this area here, which we have a loop access road that wraps itself around here. We are using retaining walls on the perimeter here to reduce the amount of clearing and grading towards the wetlands. We do have and this whole area will be served by a stormwater basin here, which is essentially in the same location it was before. But this whole area flows into here. Then we walk onto the other side of the property. So we have a second access road into this cluster of homes. Previously, we did have an emergency access that was running out through here, but we're swinging a road system down here. We have a cluster of 4 buildings, which is 8 units. We have a turnaround. As part of that too, we're proposing walking trails. If you've been out there, the meadow has been used in the past by the residents as a walking trail. So we're proposing to do a walking trail system, and we're actually running utilities down through here to connect into here, and we're going to use that as a walking trail also. Ultimately, this area and then this area drain down into the stormwater basin here, which is essentially in the same location, except we have reconfigured this stormwater basin. Before this basin had some slight encroachment into your upland review area. We were able to redesign that basin so it's not in the upland review area. And this revised plan was really formulated by 3 things. 1, it was your denial on your decision. It gave us a roadmap how to come back. 2, it was McLean's decision to reduce the density and lose 12 units. And obviously, as Joe indicated, we received a lot of impact from Dennis Quinn as to the turtles and where the development was best suited. Next slide. So as Joe indicated, what are the major improvements? We have provided wetland protections. We have 0 wetland disturbance, and I'll walk you through how we're doing that in a minute. Hydrology of, if you remember, this commission had questions about how much water was going to wetland 8. And we've done calculations to show there's no net change to that wetland. But because that, we actually went ahead and we looked at wetland 5 and 7 and did the same analysis. We essentially picked multiple locations along those wetland corridors to make sure that it was always a water balance as we went down. We reduced the project by 12 units. We eliminated 1 wetland crossing and consolidated that into 1 location. The development was shifted to protect the eastern box turtle. We've included, we put together a soil management plan, and that includes and it's in your packet, it includes best management practices on how to reduce compaction during construction, and also how to assess the soil after construction to bring it back and how to rectify it if there is some areas to basically decompact the soils. And that BMP is in your package, and that will be part of the contractor's basically handout. They'll understand that. We have low impact development. We have incorporated rain gardens throughout the development. We have a stormwater treatment train that exceeds the DEP standards. If you recall this commission, when we presented to you last time, the 2024 DEP manual says, if you provide water quality, the water quality standards, you've met our pollutant removal standards. Essentially, they were saying, we did all the hard math for you. If you do this, then you're good to go. We went beyond that. We actually did the calculations ourselves. So if you dig deep into the DEP manual, they reference an EPA document and they tell you basically how they came to that conclusion. We went into those documents and we actually provided in the manual drainage calculations to show how we are meeting the standards with the BMPs that we have proposed on this plan. I guess the answer is DEP did a good job, and we essentially proved their theory by doing our calculations. And then we did a net positive. So we looked at those 3 wetland corridors, and we made sure that at several intervals, we were never decreasing, because there was a concern from this commission that we were kind of sending all the water at the tail end of the wetland, and there was a concern that what was happening at that mid corridor. Next slide. And once again, so won't go through this, but this essentially, this comes back to your decision. You asked for a comprehensive biological assessment. Matt prepared that. You asked for a hydraulic study that maintains groundwater. I'll walk you through that in a minute. Pollution prevention. There's also, I think there was some, we had provided a integrated pest management plan and a winter management plan. The integrated pest management plan was from the villas. The commission asked for an updated one. You now have a new updated run. It was done by a consultant for McLean. And then construction phasing, I'll walk you through that. Previously, we only had 2 construction phases. We now have 6. Next slide. So I think this is an important graphic. This is an overlay of the old plan and the new plan. And bring your attention to a few things. One, as I indicated, we had 2 wetland crossings here and here. We've now got, we have a single wetland crossing. As Joe indicated, we've pulled all the units out of the meadow in that central location. Essentially, in this area, we are, instead of looping back on the road, we loop back on itself. Stormwater basins are generally in the same location they were before. We're expanding the stormwater basin, the existing stormwater basin. That was not part of the previous application. And as you see, we had an emergency axis that was running. Actually, the emergency axis was actually bifurcating. It was going between 2 wetland areas. We avoided that with this plan where we're staying outside on the perimeter. So essentially this wetland corridor remains, and then that wetland corner no longer has crossings on them. Next one. So how are we getting no direct wetland impacts? We are spanning the wetlands. Essentially, we're bridging the wetlands. The proposal, so on the right, you can see the green is the wetland area. And you can see the abutments of the bridge structure are actually quite far back. We actually did calculations. We did calculations to determine how deep the footing had to be, and if you had to do an excavation, how wide that would be. And that's where we set the footings. So that's why these footings are set quite far back from the wetland edge, because we are accommodating for any excavation to put those footings in. So we can be confident and tell this commission that, in fact, we have no direct wetland impacts. And as you can see, even at the wetland kind of has an interesting shape here, but at the central portion of it, we're actually spanning the wetlands by a lot. This is expected to be a precast unit, so essentially we're going to build the 2 abutments, and then they would essentially drop 2 basically precast decks on it. There's also an option where you can actually get the whole thing as a precast unit and you just build the 2 footings. Same desire, different companies provide thing. But the goal is that we're going to essentially, the wetland is in the middle here, and we're simply spanning that completely by the wetland. This is essentially it becomes a 60-foot span, which is much larger than what we proposed at the previous application. Next slide. The other thing about it is I think there was a need and a desire by the commission to get more information on stormwater management. So as part of the new application, we are providing 13 different analysis points for stormwater management. And what you can see here is we analyzed every section. So we have everywhere you see A, B, these orange circles are ultimately, those are the final analysis points, and those are analyzed for peak runoff rate. And we've shown in our calculations that there's no increase in runoff to adjacent properties. That's a standard by this town and by the DEP manual. In addition, the new DEP manual actually requires us to reduce the 2-year storm by 50%, and we met that standard. But the real difference here is, if you can see, we have 2 wetland corridors, this one, and everywhere you see a blue dot is where we did an analysis and showed that at each one of those intervals, there was no change in the amount of runoff that was being fed to the wetland. And we used some tools to do that. One, by expanding and improving this stormwater basin, we fed more water to the top end. We added rain gardens at the top end. You can see some of the green dots here. We added rain gardens that got more water into the wetlands, and especially in those locations. So we did analysis, and we found out if we were slightly below, we put a rain garden in, we took roof leaders to it, and we put the water. But so there was this analysis point, I believe it's 4 points along wetland 8 that we checked each interval. And then also along this other wetland corridor, we provided 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, and 5 another analysis points. But what we did was we just did an equal interval throughout and did an analysis at each point. And our conclusion was that at each individual point, there's no change in volume of runoff to the wetland all the way through the corridor. In addition to that, we did also take a look at the overall volume of water going to Hop Brook, and said what we found based upon our design is essentially we're matching existing. So we have, and part of that is we provided more BMPs. As you can see, we've added rain gardens. We enhanced the existing stormwater basin. We've provided additional detail on infiltration basins. And the final conclusion is that we've checked all the boxes in terms of stormwater management, both quality and quantity. And we believe strongly that we gave the commission the tools they asked for last time in terms of understanding that hydrology. Next slide. So as I said, this is our analysis, and we're showing here that at Hop Brook, for all the storm events, we're not showing any increase in peak runoff. Also at Hop Brook, we're showing here, these are the volumes of runoff, and you can see we're matching or slightly below volume of runoff. And then at these areas, both wetland 8 and the other wetland corridor, we have actually a net positive stormwater going there, but just a slight positive. So really, our goal was to match, not send too much water, not send too little, but it really was to match. As you can see, within a couple decimal points, we're right on. Next slide. And phasing plan. So as you recall, we had 2 phases. Essentially, the old plan was, it was 1 phase was on the north side of the wetlands and 1 phase was on the south side of the wetlands. We worked very closely with our partners, and we put together a phasing plan that we feel strongly responds to the commission's concern. And essentially, the proposal would be, we basically work our way in, and it's really about, we would get the infrastructure in, we would build the roads and the infrastructure. After that, once that area is stabilized, so the site contractor would come in, we would come in here, we want to get the stormwater system in early because we want that infrastructure in there. We want to give it every chance to grow grass and be stabilized. Once the infrastructure is in here, then we would then start working on the units. And then once that is stabilized, we jump over the other side of the wetland. Once again, we're just going to build the infrastructure. Once the infrastructure is in place, then you would jump and work into the units. And then once this area is done, this would be the next phase where once again you're building the road system, and you're building the units separately. And what ultimately this came out was that we have trimmed the phases down to just about a little. I think we have 2 phases that are slightly over 5 acres, and those are quite manageable. We also have put into the plans, you'll go there, we have put in very detailed description about when you can go on to the next phase. What does stabilization mean? What is, so you now can actually go out there, and if the contractor came to you and said, okay, I'm done with this, we want to move to the next phase, it's very simple. You said there's a chart there says, we understand, okay, this phase has to be 90% done before you can even start touching this. And so we understand every phase always has a little bit of disturbance, right? Even if we are building units, there's a little dirt area around there. So we accommodated for that. So there's basically an accounting system that allows you to understand when you're allowed to go into the next phase. Understanding, it's really a different operation, right? The company that's building the roads is not the company building the homes. So but we also want the contractor to be efficiently and move along there. But it's not shown in this, but the packet, your slide, you'll see up in the right-hand corner, a very detailed spreadsheet that shows how much has to be done, how much has to be stabilized in one phase before you can move on to the other phase. Now, whether that's being regulated by a peer reviewer or a clerk of the works, or whether the town is regulating that, we've documented that, and it's a really good roadmap in terms of how this project is. And basically, we believe that this is a very manageable plan, gets the infrastructure, gets the storm drainage in, gets the water quality in, and really you're building the units on there. And even this, when you come in and you do the mass earthwork to kind of pad these out, you're immediately going to stabilize the pad sites for those units that you're not currently going to build. And we've given procedures on, we can stabilize those areas even in the wintertime through some sprayed fiber or erosion control blanket. So essentially, if they come in here and they grade this area out, but they're only building this unit, they have to hit these areas with stabilization to the point where it's not causing any erosion. So there's a whole procedure in there. Like even here, when they do the mass earthwork to get these units in, they're not going to be building, all the units at the same time. So what they'll do is they'll stabilize those units and then just work their way around. And if you think about it too, is once they start building this road's already paved and ready to go. These units are probably already getting the landscaping in by the time you're jumping over here. So really the concept is also you're finishing the work behind you as you're moving on to it. It's not just a big open site. It's a really methodical way to work through the site. And essentially you're always finishing up behind you before you start move on to the next phase. Next slide. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Doherty, who will walk you through the landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. For the record, Michael Doherty, Manager of Landscape Architecture with SLR Consulting, 99 Realty Drive in Cheshire, Connecticut. So this evening, I'd like to just briefly walk you through the landscape strategies and goals that we've formulated in the past application and have made some refinements for this current application. So on the screen in front of you, you can see in two bold texts what are the basic goals or visions for the landscape plan that we'd like to move forward with. The top one here, increasing the ecological health and performance of the landscape. We'll be looking to remove invasives on site. There's a lot of the common invasives you see in Connecticut. Most egregious out there is bittersweet. We'll be removing that in its entirety as much as possible. There's also Japanese barberry and winged euonymus on site. In the last application discussion, there was several meetings where lawn came up and the area of lawn. I'll be going through that in a little bit more detail as we zoom into the plan, but we will be limiting the area of lawn around each of the units throughout the site. We'll also be looking to limit the manicured landscape, and when we say that, we're talking about things such as lawn, but also pruning of shrubs, things that are less naturalized. So again, I'll go through that in a little more detail on the next couple slides. Reuse of site materials, that primarily pertains to the reuse of topsoil on site. So we'll be stripping and stockpiling topsoil as needed to then respread on the site itself to have that not be an export product from the construction. And as Tom alluded to and went into some detail, we'll be looking to mitigate stormwater through the landscape itself. The second bullet point in bold, we'll be looking to utilize a variety of techniques to really increase biodiversity on site, the use of native species, pollinators, and increasing wildlife and insects on site. This will be done through planting a variety of species, sizes, and types of plants. Again, I'll go through that in a couple of the slides in a moment. We'll be targeting a variety of species in terms of pollinators, in terms of open space or meadow pollinators, as well as forest pollinators, which are common species that are overlooked in a lot of landscapes. We'll be managing the landscape as what we call a layered mosaic, and this really speaks to McLean's vision and value in terms of how they manage their landscapes and take care of them. And in the end, we'll be looking to protect all the new plantings from damage, such as deer browsing, that can occur on newly planted sites. Next slide, please. So I won't walk through the site plan as Tom gave you a great overview of that. I just want to highlight a few areas that we're going to zoom into in a bit more detail. So the first one being here with the blue number 1. This is the 3 development areas where the building units reside. So as Tom showed you, we have 3 clusters spread throughout the site, primarily on the eastern and western edges. We do have the single wetland crossing at the easternmost point of that wetland. We also have the wooded landscape to remain, which is along the entire perimeter of our site, but also along each of the wetland corridors within the site itself. We have the area here designated with the number 4 of the meadow to remain, which kind of loops around here as well. And then again, as Tom went through, we have the stormwater basins that are proposed at the edge of the site here and the revamped basin at the top near the Burkholder. Next slide. So as we zoom in a bit more to one of the cluster development areas here, this is the larger of the 3 in the eastern portion of the site. There's, again, the vegetation to remain surrounding the site. Within that area of the property line, we're also increasing the buffer itself. So you'll see on the planting plan proposed plantings all along the edge that are in the darker green, as well as shown with the numeral 2 here. We're adding evergreen species, deciduous trees, as well as shrubs to really create a layered landscape along that buffer and then start to improve the buffer to the neighbors themselves. The number 3 designated here in the internal piece of the loop road, that's what we're calling the layered landscape. So that really encapsulates the majority of the landscape area within the development sections of these cluster developments. So this is not a lawn area. This is a layered landscape of a seed mix, shrub layers, herbaceous perennials, trees, ornamental sized trees, as well as shade trees and evergreen trees. So you're really going to get that structure of overstory, canopy, and ground cover throughout this layered landscape. This accounts for a great majority of the landscape space throughout the units themselves, which you can see in the darker green shaded color here. I'm sorry, in the lighter green shaded color. Around the units themselves, we are showing a low-mow lawn mix to be implemented. As I said earlier, we are limiting that lawn. So each unit, which is two, or each building, which is 2 units, has 0.14 acres of lawn. So that's about 6,000 square feet of lawn for each of these building units. It equates to about 2.8 acres throughout the entire site. If you look around the neighborhood, at most of the houses, I'd say 95, maybe 99% of the houses around here, their front lawn is at least 6,000 square feet of lawn space. So again, to McLean's vision of really creating a landscape that is atypical and a much higher performer than a typical residential landscape, we've reduced that lawn down to just a small perimeter that can be mown around the building itself, and let the landscape of the forest edge, the meadow, and the layers that we're contributing to this project in terms of the plantings of shrubs and herbaceous species to start to really creep in and envelop each of these building units. So again, a really atypical landscape plan for a development such as this. As Tom also mentioned, the number 5, you can see 2 areas here and here that are rain garden areas. Again, these are low points in the landscape where we're capturing water from roof leaders and also from just sheet flow on the ground. These are part of a treatment train that really uses the layered landscape as a large portion of that water treatment. So the greater friction and the greater leaf cover from our layered landscape is going to help absorb the majority of the rainwater that's falling. Anything that hits the ground, again, gets slowed down by the layers that we're implementing. And if they do reach, or when they reach the rain garden, that will have a seed mix as well as herbaceous plantings that will be accounted for that can take a slight inundation of water and then drain out fairly quickly with a free draining soil mix at the bottom of those. The stormwater basins themselves, you can see here one shown with the numeral 6. Those will be seeded with a wet basin bottom mix as well as an erosion control wildlife conservation mix on the side slopes. Those will be free of shrub and tree material so that they can be maintained, they can be mown periodically. As it was mentioned for the Burkholder building, that basin did become inundated at a time with wooded landscape or wooded successional growth that impedes the basin's usefulness. So these will be maintained with seed mixes, but you can see along the perimeter of them a variety of species, again, from that layered landscape approach where we'll be planting shrubs and trees of a variety of types and sizes. And then finally, we'll have a traditional area around each of the units for some foundation plantings. Next slide. So my colleague Matt Sanford will go into greater detail in terms of the wetland itself. I just wanted to touch here on the landscape treatment for the wetland crossing. This is a small enlargement of the rendered site plan. In your packet, the detailed site plan LS1 shows the actual plantings and the number of plantings called out, as well as the plant schedule. We are, again, spanning the wetland itself, so not directly impacting the soil or the wetland itself, but we will be planting the edge here and here on either side of the wetland in a variety of sedges. And as you move to the more upland areas on either side of the span, we're planting a variety, again, of shrubs, perennials, herbaceous species, trees, to really jumpstart this area and give it the diversity and the, again, layered structure that we want to see kind of take over the site. So while we implement these kind of pockets of this layered landscape approach, the idea is these will mature over time. These are a number of different plant types that have seed bearing fruit. They'll be able to be spread throughout the site. McLean will manage the site as they do other natural resources that they own, and have the landscape really take a hold and transform a large portion of the site. Next slide. So just really briefly, just showing some of that variety in terms of some of the fruiting varieties of trees, such as swamp white oak. We'll have other smaller species, pioneer species like yellow birch, evergreens such as white spruce, and then flowering species of small tree or large shrubs such as the spice bush. Again, into a shrub layer here, gray dogwood and mountain laurel, so a mix of deciduous as well as evergreen shrub species, and then a variety of perennial herbaceous species that will have flowering structures as well as of other insect overwintering and egg laying attributes to them. So a real wide variety, and then there are multiple tables of plant schedules for the overall site as well as the wetland enhancement that hopefully you've been able to take a look at. But this speaks just to a very small snapshot of the variety that we're looking to include in terms of the size of these plants and the structure throughout the site. Next slide, please. So to wrap up the landscape tonight, Again, this is not a typical landscape approach that you would see in most commercial developments or senior living developments. I think McLean has been working towards an ever better landscape for this campus, and I think that has been showcased throughout the recent construction, particularly at the Goodrich building and the stormwater basin and the upland areas along that basin that were planted. And this, again, is a real commitment to create an ecologically rich landscape and start to transform this site, utilizing this project as a jumpstart for that transformation. Next slide. And so briefly, before I hand it off to Matt, touching on the site lighting, this had come up in the previous application. We will be using a 3000K LED that's a full cutoff light. You can see the detail here. The LED is in the upper part of the dome of the light itself, so it's a full dark sky compliant light. We've reduced the height of the poles to a 10-foot pole, again, trying to keep that light trespass down as much as possible. These were also on timers, so they could be controlled as they are in the other areas of the campus. But really reducing the height, having a full cutoff, and the more amber light source at 3000K is going to make these lights much less of a light source that can be seen from a distance. Thank you.
Madam Chair, maybe we could take a 30-second pause. If there are some additional seats behind us, so if anybody wanted to take advantage of that, now would be the time.
Thank you, George. I didn't see them.
Good. Good evening. For the record, it's Matthew Sanford with SLR. I'm a senior professional wetland scientist. I'm also a professional registered soil scientist. The testimony that I'll be providing tonight is all summarized in 3 documents that the Commission has for review. The first document is our soil scientist report dated January 7th, 2025. The second document that you have in your package is a wetland impact assessment dated October 6th, 2025. And lastly, you have a comprehensive biological assessment that is also dated October 6th, 2025. I will try to be brief to summarize these 3 reports. The first report that we'll start with, or first topic we'll start with, is the biological assessment that's been completed on the site. If we can go to the next slide, please. So SLR, per recommendations from this commission, asked for a comprehensive biological assessment. Our ecology team completed surveys and a biological assessment on this property in 2025, specifically during the summer and October and the fall of 2025. Your report has extensive amounts of data that list the wildlife species that were observed on site, an extensive botanical list of all the different plant species that were observed during those different times of year that were out on the site. But I think what I'd like to start with is the cover types on the site. This graphic is also in your report, but exemplifies the types of vegetative covers that we have on the 110-acre site. So we didn't just focus in on the development that is proposed before this commission. We looked at the entire 110-acre McLean site. And as you see here, we have a bunch of different colors, greens, oranges, browns, etc., depicting the various cover types that are on the site. The black colored area represents the development zone. So that's where existing buildings, sidewalks, parking lots, driveways, some of the lawn areas between buildings and sidewalks were categorized as development area. This green color here that you see scattered about the 110-acre property are the wetlands that are on the site. We'll get into the wetlands a little later on in my discussion. But those are representing the wetland areas. The gray area represented here is our ruderial meadow. We could talk about what ruderial means. Ruderial is defined basically as those areas that historically have been farmed or under agriculture, right? And now have been kind of left to grow on their own without a lot of management. And so that's how we define ruderial. And we have ruderial meadows. We'll talk about ruderial forests as well in a minute. And we've broken up the forests based on the types of tree species that you see out there, the age class, et cetera. And that's how we've defined our different various forest types on this campus. In addition, before I get into the forest types, we have these yellow looking circles here. Those are the existing stormwater basins that are on the site. We'll talk about that later on as well. The orange communities that you see here are what we call our ruderal forests. So those are former agricultural fields that have now transitioned to early successional forested environments. And so what we see in the overstory in those forests are typical early successional tree species. That might include black cherry, might be the birches, so black birch, gray birch. Also consists of our poplar species. Could be quaking aspen, could be big tooth aspen. And what we find in the understory typically is usually not a biodiverse understory because it's usually colonized by invasive plant species. And that's exactly the case in these areas that are highlighted in orange. We find Asiatic bittersweet, one of our invasive vines, covering the actual ground cover in these areas. Multiflora rose, a very thorny shrub, covering portions of the understory here. It makes it very difficult to get through these forested areas. Japanese barberry, another thorn or stipuled shrub that is in here. Winged euonymus, also known as burning bush, is the common name that most people might recognize, with the fiery red leaves in the fall. And lastly, another herbaceous cover type that we see in this is garlic mustard. So again, indicating to us as ecologists, these are areas that have been formerly disturbed by agricultural activities. They've also obviously recolonized with woody vegetation, early successional vegetation, and so we call them ruderial forests. The area up in the southeast corner of the site, this patch here, is what we call a tree plantation. So when you look at an aerial map, you'll notice that that area is predominantly covered with white pine. Age class of that white pine, we think was actually installed somewhere between the late 1970s and early 1980s. You can see in the aerials where they started planting white pines and rows, basically soldier rows along this area. The size class generally ranges from 8 to 18-inch diameter breast height diameter of the trees that are out there. What it does is it really minimizes because of the dense canopy that's out there with the white pine needles. You have a very low density herbaceous and shrub layer in this particular tree plantation area because the plants get shaded out. We also have our mixed, these brown colors here, our mixed oak and coniferous forests, so white pines predominantly are located in those areas. And our last one would be hardwood and hemlock forests. So those are generally the cover types that you see on the property. Next slide, please. Here's a couple photos. In the upper left hand, this is the field, the old field. We also find that this old field is pretty much dominated by little blue stem, which is a grass species and one of our native grass species. We're also starting to notice, because there isn't a lot of maintenance ongoing out there, we're starting to see autumn olive, which is another one of our invasives, start to creep into the edge of the field and also interior of the field. So something else that we noted in the ruderial old field. Tree plantation, you can see all the trees are very close together, all about the same age. Your understory is relatively sparse in here because of the lack of light. The ruderial forest has more more open canopy, but in many cases, we have areas that don't have a whole lot of dense vegetation. Some areas are sparse, and then some areas are very dense, like talked about, multiflora rose, Japanese barberry, but that's what the rhodiola forest looks like. Your mixed oak, white pine forest on the lower left-hand corner, your hardwood, hemlock forest, and lastly, the lawn areas that are seen on site. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the wetland resources. So the wetlands on the site have been flagged many times, actually by myself and other soil scientists with SLR. Our first flagging of wetlands on the site occurred in 2009. Then we had another flagging in 2014, and then our third flagging for this particular project in 2024. The wetlands primarily consist of glacial tilt site soil wetlands, poorly drained soils. Most of these belong to the Wilbraham series. Wetland 1 is our largest wetland on the site, located in the northeastern portion of the site. That's a palustrine forested wetland. That's wetland 2. Wetland 1, located here, is another palustrine forested wetland towards the northeastern portion of the site. Wetland 6 is a wet meadow, palustrine wet meadow emergent wetland, located here in the corner. And then as we move down to where our project area is, we've got 3 wetland communities here. We have wetland 5, 7, and 8. All of these belong to palustrine forested wetland cover types in accordance with the Accordion classification system. And we also have stormwater basins both east of wetland 5 and on the west side of wetland 5. The wetland sizes themselves in our proposed development area, they're relatively small in size. Wetland 7 is roughly 0.42 acres. Wetland 5 down here, the smallest wetland, is 0.13 acres. And wetland 8, this finger here, is approximately 1.3 acres. Each of the wetlands drain basically from north to south, northwest to southeast, all headed towards Hop Brook. That's located off of the graphic that I'm pointing to. The wetlands 5 and 7, as I talked about, are palustrine forested, but I think the way to describe them, they're basically seep wetlands. They're isolated and rely on a perched groundwater table for most of the year to maintain their hydrology. They obviously are fed by surface water runoff from the adjacent uplands. The primary functions and values for those 2 particular wetlands is really groundwater discharge. There isn't much else. They're really small in size. And so they don't have a whole heck of a lot of functions when we look at them based on the Army Corps of Engineers Highway Methodology Workbook. It assigns functions and values to our wetlands. These 2 wetlands in particular don't provide a good deal of functions and values. Wetland 8, in this location here, again, palustrine forested, has a combination of groundwater discharge in terms of functions and values. It provides wildlife habitat, primarily for upland species. There's very little habitat for wetland-dependent species in wetland 8. I think most importantly, though, I think the 2 probably principal functions and values of this wetland is probably nutrient assimilation, sediment retention, and that's because its headwaters start right at the property line right here. And as you can see, what is east of the wetland that feeds it is the golf course. And so stormwater runoff that comes off the surface land of that golf course is feeding the headwaters of that wetland. So I think it's important to note. In addition, this wetland at times is fed obviously by the uplands adjacent to it and detention basin 300. Under really very high discharges from that basin, there is potential for stormwater to reach the upper limits of wetland 8. In addition, we have 2 intermittent water courses. We have an intermittent water course that comes out of wetland 5. That's the little blue line you see coming out towards the field. That looks more like a rill than an intermittent water course. It basically infiltrates right above the field and disappears and goes underground. The channel disappears. And the other intermittent water course located here forms from concentrated runoff coming off the field and in the upland forest there, and that eventually meanders its way down into Hop Brook. Next slide, please. Here's some photos of the wetlands. Wetland 1, I described as a PFO, and this is showing you that it's got red maple, American elm, it's got some standing water in it. Wetland number 2, again, PFO, you can see the dense vegetation. Wetland 6 out by the entrance of McLean is a wet meadow wetland, dominated obviously by herbaceous vegetation. Not a lot of trees. There is some shrubbery on the perimeter of the wet meadow wetland. Wetland 5, if you can make it out, is right here. It's again that palustrine forested wetland seep. Wetland 7, another palustrine forested seep, and then wetland 8. Next slide, please. Our water courses, as I described a minute ago, the intermittent water course discharge from wetland 7, if you could actually make it out, there's not much of a defined channel. It occurs right in this location here. And again, it infiltrates right, and here's the field right here in the background, and it infiltrates just above the field into the underlying soils under the field. The intermittent water course that I talked about, that's just north of wetland 8, is shown here, meandering down to Hop Brook. There's a wetland, this is wetland 8, there's a defined swale or water, intermittent water course towards the end of wetland 8 that eventually feeds into Hop Brook. You'll notice here that this has been slowly being filled in by somebody with woody debris. Looks like cut logs, et cetera, are actually being dumped in that particular water course. Lastly, this is a picture looking from our site down into Hop Brook itself. Next slide. 2 stormwater basins that I talked about earlier. There's one on the eastern side of wetland 7. This is detention basin 300. Talk about this a little later on. And then this is a newer basin on the west side of wetland 5 that's referred to in our reports as detention basin 410. Next slide. So proposed regulated activities. Our predominant regulated activities for this project occur within upland review areas. We've talked about the fact that this project doesn't propose any direct wetland impacts. And when we talk about direct wetland impacts, we're talking about, are we filling a wetland with soil, rocks, a structure? Are we excavating in a wetland that disturbs the soils in some fashion, in some way? And as we'll discuss, we've avoided that with this application that's before you this evening. What you see highlighted here in the different various colors, the cyan blue, the darker blue, the yellow, those are our activities within the upland review area. They're predominantly, if I start with the cyan area adjacent to wetland 7, are associated with obviously the grading and clearing needed for the construction of this roadway here. We've tried to minimize to the maximum extent practicable the clearing adjacent to wetland 7. We are maintaining, if you've been out to the site, there's several large trees that we are maintaining within that upland review area that provide shading, et cetera, to wetland 7. If we look at the yellow area down at the western part of the site here, just down gradient from wetland 5, yes, it's down gradient of wetland 5, so those activities are actually down gradient of the wetland, and I think that's important to note. Those occur partially in the field associated, field that extends to the north of the property and also extends into that ruderal forest area. In this location, we are maintaining stormwater hydrology that occurs today, so we're not changing the watershed of wetland 5, because again, this activity occurs actually down gradient from that wetland. The wetland's above the development activities. The blue or purplish color is representing both upland activities as well as our activity over wetland 8. This is primarily associated with the crossing and the access road that feeds these southeastern units, as well as the stormwater basin. We have protected the riparian zone of wetland 8 by implementing a retaining wall in this location. So that reduces the need to clear more vegetation closer to the wetland, reduces the grading in those areas, and protects the vegetation, the riparian upland vegetation adjacent to the wetland. crossing itself, as we talked about, Mr. Daly and Mr. Doherty have presented graphics on the crossing. I think it's important to note that that crossing does not result in any direct impacts to the wetland, meaning we're not discharging any fill to the wetland, we're not excavating any soil within the wetland. As this is described in our impact assessment, the removal of trees will be necessary in order to construct the crossing. The stumps that are associated with those trees that need to be cut down will remain in place to provide woody habitat structure under the crossing itself and in the wetlands that are clear slightly beyond the upstream and downstream sides of that culvert would remain in place. Woody stumps that occur in the upland review area that are within the footprint for the substructure or footing would have to be removed in order to actually install the substructure itself. As Mr. Doherty also pointed out, we have a robust planting plan for that crossing with a variety of native herbaceous and woody vegetation. I think it's important to note that this crossing is maintaining the functions and values of that wetland number 8. And I described wetland 8, that's the headwaters. This particular area is the headwaters of wetland 8. And if you remember, I said there's a couple things that functions that it provides groundwater discharge. This is not going to interrupt groundwater discharge because we're spanning over the wetland. Number 2, we talked about the important functions and values of this wetland, which is a simulation of nutrients that come off of the golf course and any sediment that may come off the golf course. Those functions are not adversely impacted by spanning over the wetlands. So those functions that occur today will occur once this bridge is in place. And lastly, from a wildlife perspective, upland dependent wildlife is the predominant use of this wetland. With this crossing, the size of the crossing, 60-foot span, we are maintaining that east to west corridor for wildlife to move from the golf course onto the McLean property and then west onto the Hopbrook corridor. So I think that's important to note. So all of those functions and values are actually being protected by the approach to this crossing. Next slide, please. This is just a photo of the crossing area. If you've had a chance, as the commission have had a chance to go out there and look at it, you'll probably say to yourself, there's not much of a wetland here. It doesn't look very wet. It has a high groundwater table seasonally. It does not have a real intermittent watercourse feature or surface water during most of the year. But obviously it has a groundwater table that's high enough that supports hydric soil formation, as well as the ability to support hydrophytic vegetation. Next slide, please. This is just more of the upland review area impacts. We've just talked about this. Next slide. Similarly, we've already gone over this. Next slide. And lastly, I guess, in closing for this evening, you know, it's my professional opinion as a professional wetland scientist, as a registered soil scientist, as an ecologist, that the proposed development that is before you will not have an adverse effect or impact on the wetlands and watercourses on the site. In fact, we have protected those valuable functions and values of the wetlands on the site. We've implemented multiple measures to protect the wetlands on the site. The first being the redesign of the development itself, reducing the amount of crossings of a wetland, reducing the amount of clearing adjacent to wetlands. We've developed a robust sediment erosion control plan, phasing plan to protect the wetlands. We've also developed a stormwater management plan to protect the wetlands. And as Mr. Daly described, we've done a significant analysis, comprehensive analysis on the hydrologic regime to these wetlands. And those analyses demonstrate that there will be no net change to the volume of water that reaches these wetlands. So with all that being said, again, I'll just state for the record again that it's my professional opinion as a wetland scientist that this project as proposed before you will not have an adverse impact to the wetlands on the site.
Thank you, Matt and Tom and Mike. Just a couple of brief additional elements from me, Madam Chair. Just want to note, we have read the memos that the commission has by Brittany McGilpin, which is the staff reports. Well done, no response needed that we could tell. And from your peer review firm, Barton and LaJudas, and Deputy Town Engineer Adam Kessler. We appreciate their thoroughness and their diligence in keeping the process on track. Our team will be providing responses to the memos from B&L and Mr. Kessler. On our initial review, we don't foresee having any problems addressing and resolving all of their questions. But I understand the B&L folks are speaking tonight, so we're not going to try to get ahead of them by beginning any responses to their memo, and we want to give you an inclusive written submission, so we will do that. And so to that end, I'd like to propose the following schedule, just so we all have sort of an understanding and a schedule in place. Our team can provide a full written response and any changes to the plans in response to those two memos by January 2nd. And we've asked, and I believe initial consultation has occurred, that B&L then provide their evaluation of our response by January 13th. And then we would ask you to resume the public hearing, assuming you don't complete it and you continue it tonight, that you resume it on January 20th, and not at your next meeting on January 6th, because it just, with the holidays, won't be enough time for everybody in fairness to do their work and to give the commission, the public, and everyone a chance to read everything before the meeting. So we thought that would make sense to resume on January 20th.
Thank you. That sounds reasonable.
Okay. And then last thing I wanted to say was the commission noted and you received an intervention petition. And I will just note, I believe you know from last time, but just to make sure everyone understands that it is the intervener's burden, of course, under the state statute, section 22A-19, to prove their allegations. And they must provide technical evidence to support those allegations. And of course, interveners are treated as a party to the proceeding. They gain certain rights, but they also take on the obligations of a party to be fair to the commission, the applicant, and the public in the timing of their submission. And I would note our application was filed over 2 months ago. So presumably the interveners have already provided the commission in their notice of intervention the evidence that they contend supports their allegations. But if they haven't and they plan to submit anything else, I just wanted to ask, Madam Chair, that you call on them when they come forward to submit their evidence here tonight, so that it will give everyone, the public, the commission, and we, the applicant, a fair opportunity to consider and respond to that evidence at the next hearing on January 20th.
All right, thank you.
That's our presentation. That's our scheduling request. We thank you for your time and attention. Happy to answer questions and, of course, respond later to any other comments that come in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the third-party reviewer tonight.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Johanna Duffy. So I work for Barton & LaJudas, a multidisciplinary engineering firm. We were hired as the third-party peer review consultant for this project based on the complexity. We are here to support and assist the commission with the review of this application. We have received all of the information that was submitted as part of the application in October. We have reviewed that in earnest. I am here to represent a larger review team that Barton & LaJudas has put together. The topics that we focused on for our review were wetlands, wildlife and habitat, and water. Water including stormwater, drainage, and hydrological considerations. Our comments were summarized and submitted in a letter dated December 10th to the commission. I have been asked to review those for this meeting and submit them to this meeting's record as well. So I have what we submitted in front of me, and I'm just going to not item by item read everything, but just for those that might not be familiar with what our review has concluded. The other thing I'll say is that we largely identified areas where we had questions in our review, where we felt that clarification was needed, where additional support was maybe lacking or missing. And we asked that, or made recommendations to the commission that they seek to ask for that additional support and data and information so that everybody has that at their disposal in order to continue the review of the application. When looking at the overall design review, we had some questions related to utilities, where utilities were located, particularly at the wetland crossing location, and how they were being installed, either on the bridge, off the bridge. There were also some retaining wall locations along that wetland crossing location as well. So we had some questions related to the purpose, the sizing and dimensions and lengths, and what those lengths were at that location. We also submitted some recommendations for additional information looking at seed mixes and plantings, making sure that planting schedules and tables were adequately included on all of the necessary LA sheets that were submitted as part of the larger plan set. One of the other overall design review comments that we had was looking at the 4 buildings that you see here at the bottom of this picture, and just providing some justification as to the purpose of that portion of the site proposal. There were some noted potential impacts maybe related to that portion of the site, and we wanted to better understand kind of the positives and the negatives related to that portion of the project. So we asked for some clarification and recommended that the commission ask for some clarification related to that specific portion of the layout. On the wetland side, we had a question about the existing bioretention or detention basin to the north. Just ensuring that that was not a resource that was going to be federally regulated by any means, and clarifying that. Also looking to clarify where stumps were being left and the purpose for that. That was related to the wetland crossing location at wetland 8 and where those stumps were located, whether that was in the wetland, outside the wetland. We also had some comments under wildlife and habitat review and made some recommendations that, again, the plantings be confirmed, whips versus container versus balled and burlapped, making sure that numbers were succinct, double checking the planting listings, making sure that there were no non-natives or invasive species being proposed for planting, looking at installation methods, moving and stockpiling of boulders and cut trees around the wetland location. That was something, wetland crossing location, that was something that was also mentioned, but the information as to where those were going to be temporarily stockpiled, where they were going to be utilized was missing, so just clarifying some of that information. There were also some mentions of thinning and selectively clearing some of the overstory in the wetland enhancement area, so that was an item that we thought should be clarified and strengthened. Existing vegetative types were summarized by dominant species, but there wasn't an overall cover type assessment looking at acreages of existing versus proposed post-construction to kind of look at the different cover types and what is being added, what is being lost. So we thought that that would be a helpful assessment as well. We also took a look at the biological assessment. We understand that Quinn Ecological was brought on to do some box turtle study and analysis at the site, but there wasn't data provided with the technical letter from Quinn Ecological to confirm some of the conclusions and assertions about turtle use on the property and where that use was located. So we made the recommendation that that would be helpful to better understand the specific habitats and the specific locations where this species was noted to utilize locations within the property. There were also pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction recommendations that were made in the letter from Quinn Ecological. It was not clear which are being incorporated into this project. We could determine that the turtle barrier that's being proposed was incorporated. That was shown on the plan sheets. We did make some recommendations that that be clarified on what that preventative barrier was to look like, to ensure that it was not going to be prohibitive for wildlife travel for other species. So we asked for a detail to be provided for that to better understand that element. We also, related to the work phases, asked for clarification of timing. So whether there were certain timings that needed to be a focus related to wildlife impacts, either wildlife, unprotected wildlife that utilize the site, either for nesting, foraging purposes, or for protected species like the eastern box turtle, the northern long-eared bat that kicked for the site, whether there were certain considerations on the timing side that would help to minimize and reduce impacts to those species and their habitats. On the stormwater and drainage review side, there were a number of very technical elements that were included in our letter that related to the drainage analysis that was included in the submission and the plan sheets that related to stormwater and erosion and sediment control. I won't go through those at length. There was the recommendation for additional test pits in one or two locations. We did have a comment about, instead of a temporary easement on the golf course, a permanent easement. We also thought that additional information needed to be clarified related to ongoing and post-construction maintenance of the retention basins that are being proposed on the site so that they could continue to be maintained and have access to those locations. We did also have a bunch of comments that relate to compliance with the 2024 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual and making sure that the proposal and the plan was in line with that. So those are also included in the comment letter, in addition to specific plan elements that could be addressed by revised plan sheets as well, relating to stormwater runoff, erosion, and sediment control. We had recommended that additional information about the proposed bridge structure be proposed or be provided, including layouts of bridge rail, bridge curbing, design standards, section view, etc. There was a comment as well about maybe reorienting some of the buildings to provide for walkout type units, and that's related to where the runoff from those individual building sites is going to be collected, how much runoff would occur. So just kind of reorienting and whether that was going to be a benefit on the stormwater and the hydrologic side. There was thought that that might help reduce some of the retaining walls. And then we also had the additional consideration coming out of the stormwater review about the movement of those four isolated, that one building cluster kind of to the south of the image here, whether changing that isolated feature might have a benefit on the stormwater side as well and drainage side of the site. And then lastly, we recommended a demolition plan be included for the existing elements that are going to be removed as part of the proposal. Certainly, I know there's an opportunity for other comments. We anticipate there to be responses and clarifications to the comments that we've provided thus far. Some of the responses and the comments that we've had and the areas that we recommend additional support and clarification be provided certainly may continue to cascade and have an impact on and produce other comments that we might have with subsequent reviews. But we wanted to provide these initial comments, gain a better understanding and clarification of the proposal, and then continue to assist with our support and our assistance with the commission.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do the commissioners have any questions at this point? All right. Thank you. All right. So we'll move on to the interveners. Intervener.
Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be back with you again, although I wish we weren't here. First, to the commission, I want to thank you very much for, on behalf of me, the other interveners, my family, our neighbors, the service that you are doing. We're very grateful for. You show your passion for Simsbury through this, and I know that you understand our passion for Simsbury as well in making this intervention. Where to start? I've learned. I'm sorry. I'm Andrew Grossman. I live at 17 Hop Hollow in Simsbury. You're going to hear tonight just from as interveners, me and my neighbor Kevin Grigg, who will speak in a few minutes as well. First, I just want to start by just noting, as noted by Mr. Williams, that this is a new application, not a less bad revision of an old application. And in that, this is an application for 40 homes, clear cutting 20 acres of woods, endangering wildlife habitat that is inadequately explored in the presentations this evening, and that proposed and potentially has a negative impact on the watercourse Hop Brook that edges the property. And so in that, in its own, this is a bad application that is insufficient in so many ways. So we've been down this road before. You already had one bad application, and now you're followed by another bad application. It doubles their footprint. And there are so many other issues along with the application. We wanted to note for you that included in the regulations, in what you said last time in the old application, was that you rejected it because it was an incomplete biological assessment, and you also rejected it because McLean did not show that it would not have an adverse impact on the wetlands or the watercourse. This application is also incomplete. It does not include a full biological assessment, which you asked for 6 months ago, and it does not adequately, as we just heard, describe how they're going to protect the watercourse through the filtration and sediment systems. So the application is both incomplete and inadequate again. And what we ask for tonight is for you to reject it. There is no reason to continue a public hearing with an application that does not meet the standards that you put in the last application, and then for your rejection, or for the Simsbury Inland Wetlands Code. So and finally, well, I think that's really it. We asked for you to look at to reject their application tonight. They did not adequately answer the questions that you asked them to answer. We don't have data for their biological assessment, which again is thin. If you look at the 80 some odd pages, there's 70 pages of boilerplate that goes with that goes in any standard forms, and they don't have very much information in the other areas. So rather than feel an obligation to work with McLean to help them get their application be better, we would like you to reject the application tonight. Thank you very much. And then I'll introduce my colleague, or let my colleague Kevin Greer come up.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Grigg. I am a resident of Hop Hollow, specifically 9 Hop Hollow, an environmental intervener, a professional engineer, and a retired CEO of the firm that developed the state of Connecticut stormwater quality manual for the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP. Madam Chair, do I have to stand behind this, or can I actually just talk to you?
We do need it on the mic for recording purposes, yes.
So I'm warning you in advance, I do a lot better when I'm actually able to get out and talk to people rather than stand behind this wooden tombstone.
Understood.
You know, a lot of work, obviously, has gone into this. And as Andrew pointed out, we saw a version of this in the recent past. B&L could come up with something like this. My former employer could come up with something like this. And we could argue about the virtues of the design until the cows come home. And engineers love to do that sort of thing. But I think if we do that, we're kind of missing the big picture. I think the big picture is any kind of development like this given the attendant infrastructure and its impact on the flora and the fauna and potentially the 37 homeowners that abut this property and so many other people that are residents of Simsbury, is this kind of development appropriate for this site? I think that's the big issue. And I would prefer that we not get caught up in the details, but we step back and ask ourselves, is this what we want to happen to a pristine piece of recreational open space in a community that prides itself on the preservation of such space? I think that's the big issue. That said, should the development be allowed to proceed over and above the repeated objections of these 37 adjacent landowners, as well as others in Simsbury, which you will hear from tonight, I'm sure, it must ensure that the attendant and adverse impacts on the flora and fauna that currently depend on this site, its unimpeded accessibility, as well as its pristine environment. They rely on it for shelter, mobility, subsistence, and so forth. All of these impacts have to be mitigated in a substantive and also a sustainable manner. So any approval of this kind of undertaking, however ill-advised it may be, in my opinion, must thoroughly mitigate, if not eliminate, any potential for the contamination of aquifers and the residential well water supplied by those aquifers. This latter issue is a bona fide matter of public health. It is not a red herring, if you will. It requires a considerable amount of additional analysis prior to being cavalierly declared to be a non-issue, as has been the case to date. The latter issue is of particular concern to those of us who live below elevation-wise or downhill from where this development would be constructed. So it's my opinion, and I believe this is the intent of the town, to make sure that the health and safety of its residents are protected as much as these verdant, open recreational areas are also protected. So how do you do that? How do you ensure that these impacts are mitigated, if not eliminated? There are many ways, and SLR and others have described their approach. But in my opinion, the most effective means of doing so is to ensure strict compliance with the state's stormwater best management practices, or what you might see referred to as BMPs. It is my opinion, and an opinion that's bolstered by BNL's technical memorandum dated December 10th, previously referred to, that the current design exhibits an extraordinary number of both obvious and material deviations and omissions from these practices. Deviations and omissions that in and of themselves should be irrefutable cause for rejecting McLean's current proposal. Since these deviations and omissions are clearly and repeatedly described in BNL's memorandum, I will avoid repeating them here for the sake of time. All of you can secretly say, thank goodness. However, I'd like to ensure that you understand that strict compliance with these best management practices are necessary but not sufficient. Other interested and effective individuals have expressed their concerns in writing and during prior meetings, and you've heard some of this tonight, about the clear cutting of approximately 20 acres of hardwood, the adverse and material environmental impacts on in situ wetlands due to construction activities, the addition of 7 additional acres of impervious surface adjacent to Hop Brook, also mentioned earlier tonight, as well as the even more obvious and extensive and permanent forms of environmental degradation resulting from the development once it's completed. In addition, the installation of permanent fencing or barriers of some kind, also previously referred to, around developed areas and roadways with no express purpose or design details to determine their visual impact, the extent of their impedance to various wildlife that use the meadow as a migration corridor, nor can we, as a result, really determine whether or not these kinds of alleged improvements are really going to be efficacious or whether they're going to serve their purpose. For what it's worth, the B&L technical memorandum states that these activities may create, quote, more additional site disturbance than benefit, unquote. And again, since these concerns have already been discussed with you at some length, I will not regale you with additional details now in the interest of time or refer you to their memorandum. But folks, the omission of this kind of information is what causes us so much concern. We need more information in order to be able to make a more educated and a more complete judgment or determination on whether or not the information that we're receiving will really have as great an impact on the land and adjacent homes as we currently believe that they do. The reason we don't have this information is because in many cases, not all, but in many cases, it has not been shared with us. Those who are slated to be the most impacted are also those who have been the least involved. A couple of brief points, and then I'm going to close. Construction activity of the magnitude that you're seeing here is going to affect virtually every square foot of this development. Whether the wetland crossings are precast or whether they are cast in place, you don't just bring a helicopter in and gently drop them on the ground over the wetland area and have no impact. There's boots, there's trucks, there's graders, there's tires, there's all sorts of activity taking place in these construction areas. And I'm sure many of you have seen all the activity that typically takes place in a construction area where there's this much going on. Do not be led to believe that there will be no impact during construction due to the installation of wetland crossings. Do not allow yourself to believe that a construction program of this magnitude is not going to disturb 20 acres of forest, which will obviously be removed, wetlands, whether they have crossings in them or not. Again, this entire piece of property is going to be radically changed from being what it is today, a pristine recreational destination for so many, into a residential housing area. As a resident of Hop Hollow, I cannot tell you how many times I have seen, and in a handful of cases actually interacted, with people who are walking down Hop Hollow, the road, oftentimes with a significant other, oftentimes with a pet or multiple pets, only to end up in the meadow. It's become a place of not just recreational value, but of solace, of personal solace for people. It's somewhere people go to relax, to unburden themselves with whatever may be bothering them at the time. I think it's particularly noteworthy to recognize that during the pandemic, when we were all concerned about so many things, particularly public health, the traffic in and out of the meadow increased dramatically, because it is a place where not just flora and fauna, but human beings like us find solace. So in summary, it's really the paucity of information available, at least to me, that prevents me and us from undertaking a reasonably thorough review of this revised development proposal. It causes me to call it into question. I see no reason at present to believe that the numerous adverse impacts to the flora and fauna that inhabit the meadow, or to the broad cross-section of Simsbury residents, those in West Simsbury, those from Canaan Way, those from east of Great Pond Road, and other places in Simsbury. I see no reason to believe that the impacts to all those people are going to be any less due to the current proposal, or substantially less anyway, due to the current proposal than they were with regard to the former proposal that was rejected. So I ask all of you, the commission, as well as residents of this wonderful town that we have, to stand up, to have courage and say enough is enough. This is not about money. This is about the preservation of something far more precious. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Oh, okay. So let's see what the time is now. I don't know if anyone requires a break at this point. Not hearing, so we will continue then with public audience. We do have a list. Oh, that's what George went to get. All right, good. There's one. Oh, thank you. Okay.
I have to go be a dad and pick up my kid, but I promise I will watch every single moment of all of these when I get home tonight.
Very good.
I'm assuming you're not gonna have a vote tonight.
No, we're not. All right, thank you. All right. So the first, for public audience, we're hoping to limit it to, we don't have that many tonight, but if you could limit your presentation to 5 minutes. Also, keep in mind that we are the Conservation Inland Wetland Commission. Things that are related to other land use boards, such as zoning, those items should be taken up with those committees. We are trying to follow the laws that are stated by the state for protection of wetlands. And as a Conservation Commission, we really don't have any regulatory teeth, but we do offer suggestions how to improve projects to be better for the environment. So if you could keep your comments related to those things, either the conservation issues or the wetlands issues, it would be greatly appreciated. And we will limit everyone to 5 minutes. And no personal attacks, let's all be polite. And we'll go from there. So the first person on the list is Ruth Kahn. All right. Ready or not? Here. All right. And Ruth, if you could state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Ruth Kahn. Can you hear me? It's loud enough. And I live at 50 Sarah Lane, which is the Goodrich Building in McLean. I was just going to talk about why McLean is a good place. And that is something that's very near and dear to my heart because my husband, who passed away almost a year ago, he and I decided when we got his diagnosis that he had Parkinson's, among other things, other health issues as well, that we would move to McLean. And we had two big reasons for that. One was that it had a really fine health facility that he could be moved into if he became too incapacitated. And some of you may know that Parkinson's is a progressive disease which cannot be cured. So that was one consideration. The other more important one was that they have a policy of aging in place, which is not true for a great many of the communities that seniors have available to them. And so because of that, it was possible for my husband in the last 3 years of his life to have a quality of life that was much more enhanced than if we would have been alone with aides in our house, which was too big for us to manage. And we would not have had the social network that we were acquired in McLean through the fact that we were with other people who were in similar circumstances and who were very generous and kind and tolerant and interesting. We have a lot of really interesting people that we met, and that was wonderful for Mike, who liked to talk. Mike was a professor at the University of Hartford in the Department of Psychology and the associate director of the graduate psychology program, and he also taught and supervised students at the psychiatric department at UConn and had a private practice. So he was a very busy man, and he needed social intercourse in order to thrive and to be comfortable in the last years of his life. And that was something that was made available to us at McLean. It is something that's not readily available, and I think other people need to have it available to them. And so I feel very strongly that this is something that we really need, not only in this community, but throughout the country. That we need places where people who are ending their life can live in quality life and be able to age in place and feel comfortable with their own furnishings, their own apartment, and the people around them who care for them and who love them. So I would make a pitch for there are places like this that are really necessary. And here is a place that has done it and done it well. And why not let them do more of what they do well? The intricacies of all this engineering and stuff goes right by me. But we own property in Maine, and we own a fair piece of property in Maine where we go camping. And I'm a little bit confused about why people think that a piece of property could belong to them just because they're trespassing and walking on somebody else's land and getting solace there. I just, that sort of leaves me with, what's freedom all about and, whose land it is and all of that. I don't know about what plants should be put in, and I don't know what trees or what wetlands. I know you can cut trees off and leave the stumps there because we've done it on our property, both here in West Hartford and also in Maine. But I really have a problem with somebody thinking that just because they kept walking on someone else's property, it's now theirs. Especially when the institution that you're dealing with has a huge conservation area that you could walk in anytime you want. They don't stop you. It's open to the public, and it's very big, much bigger than the meadow area. And it's close by to the meadow area. So it's a little confusing to me why people feel they need to walk in that area rather than somewhere else, but that's a separate issue. So I really just think it's very important to have places where people can have the quality of life at the end that they should. And so I hope that enters into your considerations, even though it's not a wetland.
Thank you, Ruth. Unfortunately, that's beyond our scope, but we appreciate your comments and passion and thoughts. Beverly Earl, and if we could, again, we're going to try to, keep our comments. I mean, these things are important. Unfortunately, it's beyond our jurisdiction. So, yeah, Beverly.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee. I know you're volunteers, and we really appreciate it. I'm sitting in the back with a lot of our fellow residents from McLean's.
But I don't have my name on.
Story, although brief, to tell you.
Thank you.
My name is Beverly Earl. I've written a longer letter, and I'm going to spare you that, but it's in the booklet that you have. My name is Beverly Earl. After working for Bentley University for 35 years, I retired in 2017 as Professor Emerita. My husband and I bought a house in Suffield to be near our daughter and son-in-law and to help with their growing family. With the 3 grandkids going to school, we decided to move to McLean in February of 2025 to enjoy our lives and have options if we faced illness. This gives all of our family great peace of mind. And I think that's one of the important points, is that your family can feel secure when you've made this decision to go to McLean. In March, my husband unexpectedly had a triple bypass and a new aortic valve, the kind where your chest is sawed open. He returned to our apartment with McLean outpatient care. I could call the health center if there was a problem, even on Sunday. And I did have to call on Sunday, and the nurse came to our apartment, called the cardiologist, and altered his medicine pretty dramatically with the cardiologist's agreement. And that is what McLean is like. You come home from the hospital and you're pretty vulnerable, and there are people there that can help you without sending you back to the hospital for another 3 days of nightmare in the emergency room. Environmental concerns are important, and 2 of the gentlemen from the interveners have tried to make that point. But there needs to be a balance. Surely making a place for the elderly in Simsbury is as important as the box turtles. Abutters should not be able to block all reasonable development because they want to preserve property that they don't own, exactly as it was when they bought their house. While I understand they are using their best argument they can to try to stop, and let's be clear, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to stop any further discussion about this. They want you to vote tonight. The town of Simsbury has a duty to look at other interests as well. And you as the commission are representative of the town. With the approval of these 40 villas, McLean will make room for future seniors as well as buttressing its financial security. McLean trustees cannot do this alone. They need the help of a prudent Simsbury carefully planning for its future, for not only conservation land, but places for seniors to go, places for all of your parents, and for perhaps you, if you're lucky enough to live as long as some of my colleagues are living at McLean. The new proposal ameliorates the project's impact on the environment. There is a significant response from community members supporting the project, not just from residents. It's not only the abutters who have an interest, but current and future employees and residents of Simsbury and McLean and their concerned families who want to keep their grandmas and grandpas close to them. Unnoticed by the abutters is what McLean does for the greater community. It's too long a list, but here are just a few. $800,000 in lieu of taxes payment by McLean to Simsbury with zero impact on the schools. 270 residents approximately and 350 employees spending their money at local businesses and making donations to nonprofits. The spectacular 4,400 acre McLean Game Refuge open to the entire community, and the extraordinary Meals on Wheels program that extends to Simsbury and other towns as well. Please approve this well-conceived, scaled back, and needed plan to help ensure that McLean continues offering financially solid options. And I underscore that because that's part of this, is that a community like this has to grow and change. Financially solid options to seniors, as well as a great place to work for people from Connecticut and other states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to state that we are prescribed by state law what we can and cannot approve based on the wetlands. So I understand the passion for this. I know my parents both went to McLean's. A lot of people here on our commission have connections somehow to people on this, these things. Oh, sorry. But, if we could keep our comments, those comments would be great for another commission, but for us, we are really just looking at we are limited to looking at those conservation issues. We appreciate your passion, though. All right. So Richard Herbeck. Thank you.
There are a lot of wires here. Let me pull this out. My name is Richard Herbeck. I reside at 50 Sarah Lane in the McLean complex, apartment number 214, in the Goodrich building. I moved to Simsbury about 3.5 years ago when it first opened, when the Goodrich building first opened, for occupancy. I've lived most of my life in New York State, primarily in Briarcliff Manor in Westchester County, New York. I spoke to you once previously about what I did for a living. My occupation was as a professional town manager, and I worked in the village of Scarsdale, the village of Croton-on-Hudson, and the city of Newburgh. I came to Simsbury as my wife has Alzheimer's disease and needed a full-time memory care facility. I had looked at a number of these back in Westchester County, but my daughter-in-law, Jennifer, said she wanted to look around Simsbury, where she lived. And Jennifer said to me that she would look at facilities that she thought would be more appropriate. And we decided after visiting several that the best place for Linda was at the residence at Brookside in Avon. Eric and Jennifer and their children, my grandchildren, have lived in Simsbury in 3 different homes over the past 20 years. Eric has been very involved in the youth hockey activities with the Northern Lights program, which he ran at one point. And Jennifer, who you may know, runs the Second Chance Shop, among many other activities that she's involved with. 2 of my 3 grandchildren are graduates of Simsbury High School. Savannah was the co-captain of the Northern Lights, of the Simsbury High School ice hockey team. I had no intention of relocating to this area, as I had been very involved in many professional associations in New York State and the lower Hudson Valley region. But life sometimes forces you to move on, and I decided to sell my house in 2022, move closer to Linda, move closer to my son and daughter-in-law, and that's why I'm here. I began to look for an apartment, and after a period of time, came upon the McLean campus, where the new Goodrich building was under construction. I had never contemplated a senior independent residence community, but I was intrigued, and I decided to reserve an available unit. In my annual Christmas letter that I write every year, this year, I said, what a great place for retirement. There are many activities, great company, delicious food, and a wonderful lifestyle. I work out every day in the fitness center. I've been an active member of the Veterans Committee, participate regularly in our memoir group, poker group, Parkinson's group, among many other things. On January 6th, I'm having my left knee replaced at the Bone and Joint Institute in Hartford Hospital. After that surgery, I will be at McLean Health Center for residential rehab. As we age, we all need places like McLean for the senior population. There's a growing need for additional senior housing, and there is currently a long waiting list at McLean. I know that your job with respect to this application is to make a decision on whether to approve wetland permits. I spoke in favor of the original application at one of your earlier hearings. It is my opinion that this current application ameliorates the wetland concerns that were raised by the interveners. During my time as village manager of Croton-on-Hudson, I was involved in at least 6 major development projects, including various condominiums and the Hudson National Golf Course. Each of these was contentious. The various boards, including planning, zoning, wetlands, and the governing body, which is the Board of Trustees in Croton-on-Hudson, all had parts to play in the approval process. Some changes were made after review, but all were ultimately approved. There were neighbors who protested, as they did not want any changes made in their neighborhoods. But I can honestly say today that the community has well accepted each of these projects, which changed approximately 1/2 of the community, dating back to 1980 when I first was appointed village manager. They have added to the vibrancy of Croton-on-Hudson, and in my opinion, it is a better community than the one I found in 1980.
Thank you. Do you have much more to say, or? All right, thank you.
At the end.
All right, good. Just want to give everyone a fair chance.
I know that each of you must decide on this project with respect to its merits. Many excellent professional firms have been engaged to work on the Meadows project. This project of 40 units will allow for the expansion that McLean needs to grow and provide for the senior needs in the Simsbury community. And I hope that you will agree and grant the necessary wetlands permits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Herbert. Nora Howard is next.
Just going to make it a little safer for everybody. No, you're good. You don't move. I'm just going to move this. So for speakers, it might be easier just to enter from the left side. There's no wires there.
Yes.
Good evening, commissioners and the public. My name is Nora Howard. This will take 2 minutes, and I talk about the environment.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I am a resident of 215 Cider Brook Road in Avon and a prospective resident of McLean. I'm the historian of the town of Avon, and I'm aware of McLean's history. McLean adheres to the terms of the generous bequest of Senator and Governor George McLean in 1932. The McLean organization follows his instructions about environmental stewardship. It follows his wishes for caring for people throughout the Farmington Valley. To me, the big picture is that the conservationist governor and senator from Simsbury would approve of the Meadow Homes plan. He would applaud that it meets the environmental terms and spirit of his enormous bequest, which Simsbury has benefited from since the McLean Fund Trust was activated for Simsbury in 1950. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin Grigg. Kevin Grigg? No, that's right. I was thinking, well, you're signed up here. Okay, Mike Payne. Thank you, Kevin.
Madam Chairman, fellow commissioners, nice to see you again. I'm Mike Payne. I serve as chairman of McLean Board of Trustees. I also serve on Simsbury Board of Selectmen, but I want to be clear that my comments are made solely in my personal capacity and do not represent any position by the Board of Selectmen. McLean trustees have discussed this project extensively as it has developed and evolved with informed input from outside the organization. That's not unusual for us. What may be more unusual is the framework that we use to guide these discussions and decisions. Those decisions are measured against the standards set forth in Senator George McLean's will, emphasizing stewardship, care, and long-term responsibility. We take that obligation really seriously. Our adherence to that will is reviewed by our council and periodically by the Simsbury Regional Probate Office. After careful consideration and many changes, the Board of Trustees is fully supportive of this revised proposal. We bring this project forward because there's a clear and growing need for this type of housing in our region. McLean exists to serve older adults and people within the valley, We believe this proposal aligns with that mission while respecting the land and the broader community that we're part of. While we were disappointed that the original application was denied, we listened carefully to the Commission's comments and concerns. Those concerns allowed us to make meaningful changes to the project, and they're reflected in the revised plan that you see before you tonight. This proposal was not simply resubmitted, it was revised dramatically. McLean has long been an active and engaged member of the Simsbury community. We take pride in the contributions we make to the town and beyond. We view this project as a continuation of that commitment, not a departure from it. I also recognize that some
Good evening. I'm over the years, I've seen the McLean campus when I first already on conservation. Ensure that.
Most bear human conflicts.
highlight two including the highly popular sentence, "This project will deliver lasting benefits for the town of..." That may be accurate, but as I think approve or reject the wetlands application. That decision has to be based in generalities. They must pinpoint specific reasons why either the application is flawed or why the environmental impact is too great, a bar I believe they have met. As you peruse the submitted letter of relevance, the second and final point I wish to make has to do with the incredible sense of deja vu that many of us are experiencing. Case in point, back on February 18th, 2025, when we were all gathered in the Henry James Auditorium for McLean's unveiling of their initial proposal, one of the commission's very first questions to McLean was, how much forest will be cut down? McLean's representatives did not have an answer. And as they fumbled to find one in their binders, it was an audience member who ultimately shouted it out, 19 acres. Now here's the deja vu part. Just a couple months ago, on October 21st, after McLean presented its revised application, the very first question this commission asked was, you guessed it, how much of the forest will be taken down? McLean's representatives did not have an answer to that question. The correct answer, 19.8 acres, was once again shouted out by a member of the public sitting in the audience. Is this what transparency looks like? I mean, the number of acres being clear-cut would seem to be a pretty important number for an applicant to have top of mind, particularly with a project of this magnitude. Yet twice now, McLean's representatives did not have an answer ready to that question. This, in my view, is just the most visible example of a pattern of obfuscation that has characterized McLean's approach to this entire endeavor. This is not how applicants for wetland permits should engage with the town. To approve this application is to implicitly sanction such disingenuous behavior, and that is the wrong signal to send not just to this applicant, but to all who come after them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Dave Nagy.
My name's Dave Nagy. I live at 36 Brook Drive, a neighbor to the McLean property. I live on the Hot Brook, right out the back door. In the 77 years that I've lived in Simsbury, we have been very aware of McLean. My grandparents did their hospice at McLean. My wife volunteered there for years. My daughter, for the longest time. McLean even did some rehab for my wife when she had a brain tumor surgery. So we're neighbors, and we have a tremendous love of McLean. I will only take a minute or two more. But when my mom and dad moved here in 1946 and raised their 6 kids, Central School, St. Mary's, Henry James, Simsbury High, all the kids went there. Dad started his own business the same year, Specialty Salt. Now 75 years old, 3rd generation. So we're familiar with Simsbury just a little bit. Dad also had a number of partners, and in that partnership, they did many developments. They were the ones that did the Simsbury post office. They built the post office. They built Iron Horse. They conceived of Iron Horse and built Iron Horse, and talk about some contentious wetlands in Iron Horse in years. We 6 kids lived through that. So from the side, I just didn't understand it as much as I do now. They also developed the Simsbury Town Shops and the 2 buildings on either side. What does that tell you? It tells you that a tremendous amount of jobs were created by that. He and his partners bought a number of properties and developed them, and they all created jobs. During that whole time, McLean was there helping us. My wife and I are looking for a place to live in our older years. We've been very happy with McLean, and our kids and our grandchildren are in this area. We think that McLean has the highest standards that are needed to improve this wetlands problem and project. And we urge you to approve the application. The last thing we would like to see is that we have to move to another community after living here all our lives, just because we can't find quality retirement arrangements. So please consider strongly, and all those developments that my dad and his partners were involved in, they also founded Hot Meadow Country Club. So they've created jobs. They've been through all this turmoil. And it's nothing new now, but it's something that we really appreciate you guys as a commission volunteering your time and evaluating very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Matt Sturdivant.
Hello, and thanks for your time. I appreciate that. My name is Matt Sturdivant. I live at 14 Shady Lane, so my property backs up to Hot Brook and also includes parcels on the other side immediately next to McLean. So any sort of erosion, flooding directly affects the property that I own. It was good to hear some of these ideas. Maybe McLean would like to go to Westchester County or Avon, maybe Nod Road. I think those are interesting propositions. But from my perspective, I think this commission ought to consider why McLean Affiliates is so doggedly determined to proceed with this real estate development, despite the fact that the project requires the raising of 19.8 acres of, as they describe, hardwood and coniferous forest, page 7 of their wetland impact assessment, and will result in an additional 6.7 acres of impervious surface on McLean's property, which abuts Hop Brook, which I observe has occasionally flooded and eroded the banks along my backyard, for a total of 22.1 acres of impervious surface on the site. And though this commission doesn't consider it, this also doesn't comply with current zoning, which is for single-family residential with homes on lots of 40,000 square feet in size per home. So I wondered about McLean Affiliates' motivation for this real estate development, and the answer is clear in its 990 tax filings. McLean has operated at a net loss for 5 consecutive fiscal years, totaling $18.6 million over that period. The source for this is their own 990s. According to the most recent annual tax filing by McLean Affiliates made available in August, the nonprofit had a net loss of $5.67 million for the fiscal year ending in September 2024. For perspective, that's equal to 17% of revenue during that fiscal year. The year before that, fiscal year 2023, the net loss was $7.755 million, which was equal to 25% of McLean's revenue that year. We won't know about the most recent fiscal year, which ended September, until we have a 990. So it could be 6 consecutive years of net losses. McLean Affiliates' financial circumstances explain the urgency and determination to build dense housing where there is currently forest, meadow, and wetlands, next to a brook that floods from time to time. They need a new source of revenue, and this particular housing development is their answer. However, it doesn't come without risk to McLean's financial situation. On June 10, 2025, Fitch Ratings affirmed the ratings on $65 million of bonds issued by the Connecticut Health and Educational Facilities Authority on behalf of McLean Affiliates at BB+. For investors, the BB rating categorizes the bond debt as, quote, speculative, and the ratings, quote, indicate an elevated vulnerability to default risk, particularly in the event of adverse changes in business or economic conditions over time. However, business or financial flexibility exists that supports the servicing of financial commitments, according to Fitch Ratings. Even more compelling is what Fitch said about this development proposal, which is at the heart of Fitch's, quote, negative outlook that it gave to McLean Affiliates. Quote, the negative outlook reflects uncertainty around McLean's potential expansion project. While Fitch believes the project will ultimately be accretive to the community, additional debt, construction risk, and execution risk will pressure the rating. As is common for LPC expansion projects, Fitch believes significant additional long-term debt may pressure the balance sheet below acceptable levels for BB+, so below speculative. That sounds concerning to me, and I think it should sound concerning to the town of Simsbury. It raises doubts about the viability of this project, about McLean's ability to execute it and to complete it, and the long-term success of this project. What might happen if McLean Affiliates is not able to pull off a financial turnaround? What will happen to these duplexes then? Will they be turned into apartments? Or will they sit as empty relics of a financially precarious business plan that didn't work? One thing is for certain, the 19.8 acres of forest will already be cut down, and its wildlife habitat, and in its place, an additional 6.7 acres of impervious surface next to a brook that runs through town and floods from time to time, eroding its banks in the process.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Afasteia, I'm sorry if I totally botched that last name. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and people working on this monumentous project. Am I getting this properly? I've heard some interesting
And
things.
for the
I
rec-
live at,
For the record, if you could state your name and address.
my name is Anthony Festeyer, and my wife and myself live at 50 Sarah Lane.
Thank you.
And we've been there. We were the first ones into the Goodrich, as it turns out, but that's beside the point. I have really appreciated some of the comments that I've heard here today, and I asked permission to just briefly deviate from this writing that I have. I appreciate your comments about the financial success or failure. I really do. And sir, the man next to you, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but you mentioned that people walk down the road and then go on into the meadow and look up at the site. Is that correct? Did I hear that properly? How do they get on from the road?
Sir, excuse me, Mr. Festia, if you could address.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're interesting, but
I'm
we
not
need
good
to
at
hear.
this,
All right,
really.
that's all right.
But I have done some engineering work, and it doesn't qualify if there aren't any problems. Some problems are more significant than others. But I have a feeling if we, together as a group, meaning the whole community of Simsbury, recognizes the need for this program, it will turn out okay. There are going to be bumps in the road. Trust me. I have never worked on anything where it has gone smoothly unless it was superficially simple. So with that, and thank you for those comments, really. As far as fiscal comment, that's something else. So my name, let me go through this. My wife and I reside at 50 Sarah Lane. We established our residence at McLean's on the opening day of the Goodrich building, having moved from our home in Westbrook to join our daughter and her family in Simsbury. And that's a key statement because we're dealing about people here. While we may have side issues with turtles and this and that and everything else, at the end of the day, we're dealing about people, especially people advanced in age and people have some issues with their health. And our daughter recognized that, so she highly recommended McLean's as it offered a seamless transition from independent living to hospice care and all the stages in between. I have to state that again. We will all age. Everyone in this room will age. When we leave here, we will have aged a few minutes or hours. But at some point in time, we will be in a position where we'll be flat on our backs and unable to walk. And that's where McLean's will help us. In order to provide care for the aging and infirm, Senator McLean's estate provided for the construction of facilities at 75 Great Pond Road. And I think that McLean's owns that property. In 2024, 460 persons ranging from independent living to home care and hospice, which is the normal flow, were served by McLean's. So we have a building and a facility that basically, you might remember this phrase, this is the last stop for them. And I think that's really, really important. Most of us here in this room right now are nowhere near, especially people living nowhere near that bus stop, but many of us are. These facilities provide the services which our growing aging population requires and cannot be overstated. The fact is, if you look at the belly curves for population density in the United States, it's like this, and that bottom is Asian people. People my age are growing in the United States, the number thereof. I'm growing here, but we are growing outward, and we need services. In addition, non-residents with the normal flow, these facilities provide the services which our growing population requires, cannot be overstated. In addition, non-residents take advantage of the outstanding exercise and auditorium facilities which the Goodrich offers. This inclusion, and really what I'm going to say now is very, very important. This inclusion adds to the vital sense of belonging and companionship to our residents. Part of the thing that McLean gives is the idea to be in a group, a sympathetic group with like interests. And that is very, very vital to your heartbeat and to your peace of mind and quality of life. You must trust me on that, folks. Small but meaningful medicine. Non-residents use our modern equipment and our residents benefit as well. We view these proposed villas in much the same way. Small residences, but, meaningful ones. This writing supports McLean's affiliates' application to construct 40 villas on their property at 75 Great Pond Road. And I thank you for the outstanding service that I've witnessed, actually.
Thank
I
you.
can take it. Never mind.
Thank you very much. And the final speaker for tonight on our list is Susan Messino. Where is she? You don't see her. All right. So do we take anyone else? Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Keith Robertson. I'm a managing director with a firm called Ziegler. Ziegler is the investment bank that works with McLean to help them raise the capital for their projects. And I'm just here to address the questions that have been raised about their financial position, just very briefly. So Ziegler it's a Chicago-based firm. I work solely with not-for-profit senior living organizations across the Northeast. The firm has roughly a 50% market share of the CCRC financings in the country. There's 1,911 CCRCs in the country. 75% of those are not-for-profit, so similar to McLean. And there's only 166 rated organizations, meaning a majority of the not-for-profit CCRC sector is non-rated. So if you assume the rating is a sign of strength, only about 10 to 20% of all CCRCs are actually rated. Most of them are not. The financial statements of a CCRC are quite complex and don't look like other operating businesses. So if you just look at the 990 of a CCRC, say a majority, maybe 95% of the CCRCs that I work with in the Northeast have a net loss every year, not necessarily a sign of their financial strength or weakness. Most of the financial strength of a CCRC, like McLean, comes from the cash flow statement and the balance sheet. So looking at the 990 doesn't give you the full picture. Frankly, it's a very small picture. So from my perspective, and just to leave the commission with a sense of the financial strength of McLean, McLean is very financially strong, among the strongest of the organizations that I work with in the Northeast. And I have absolutely zero concern about their financial strength going forward.
Thank you. It's definitely not relevant to our commission, but it's good to hear. Do we have any other further comments from the public? All right. We've heard a lot of testimony tonight. Do we have any questions from the commissioners, or would we prefer to go and review a lot of this information that we've had tonight and postpone and continue this public hearing to the next meeting? So I know we have a,
I'll motion that we continue the public hearing at the January 20th meeting back here at the library.
all right, do we have a second? Do we have any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And I want to, before we adjourn tonight, which we'll need a motion for, I want to thank everyone who's participating. Even if the expressions are not relevant to our commission, it's lovely to have this level of involvement by our citizens for something that which they're very, affected by and passionate for. And so I thank you all for coming tonight and taking part in this process. It makes for better applications and projects. All right. So without anything else, do we have any other, I don't think we have anything else on our agenda. Oh, yes. Do we have, what am I doing? Is that the same? Conservation Commission business, this is the same. What is it? Do we have to do this one? No. So it's the same thing. All right, so designated agent actions. Nothing. All right. So the next one is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. It's all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, everyone.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings, and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions, and it's no secret people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth, and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.